Good morning. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's commission meeting, we will examine the advanced reactor landscape, including projects that are moving toward commercialization and the NRC's readiness to accelerate the safe and secure deployment of these advanced reactor technologies. I want to thank our external panelists for joining the discussion today. Worldwide, the interest in advanced reactor technologies is at an all-time high, yet actual deployment is only limited to a few countries. In the Western Hemisphere, the lead commercial project is under construction at the General Electric Vernova BWRX 300 construction project at the Darlington site. And in the United States, we have the largest nuclear innovation ecosystem, including Department of Energy pilot programs, Department of War initiatives, as well as the work being conducted by the companies represented at the table here today. In America, the question is about execution. Can we deploy at scale, on schedule, and at lower cost? And that's where the NRC matters. Our safety decisions have to be credible, predictable, and timely. As such, we are undergoing the most comprehensive regulatory reform in nearly 50 years. And throughout this period of change, safety remains our top priority. That has not changed. What is changing is how we work. And I want to recognize the outstanding work of the NRC staff during this moment. We've prepared and published several draft executive order rulemakings to support deployment. We have issued licensing decisions ahead of schedule, and we conducted a major reorganization. In the second part of the panel, we'll be hearing from the brand new leadership team in the NRC's Office of Advanced Reactors. So before we begin our presentations, let me ask my fellow commissioners if you have any comments you'd like to make. No? Okay, with that, we'll proceed to our first presenter. I believe that is Mr. Ted Garrish from the Department of Energy.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank the Commission for the opportunity to talk about advanced reactors and some of our innovation work. Advanced reactors for the department have really provided a number of benefits for us. Really, this is the enhanced safety of the product, the small footprints for these pilot projects, and some of the special applications where these can be used. This all started last year in May when the President ordered the Department of Energy to start from scratch, to build 3 reactors and have them critical by the 4th of July of this year, our 250th anniversary. At the time, that sounded impossible. And I think we all looked at each other and said, how are we going to do this? And what has happened since then has been really quite remarkable. The industry responded. We sent out an application, a request for an applicant to submit their ideas to the department, and 11 companies responded, which that was initially sort of mind-boggling that 11 thought that they could do this. Out of that, we accepted them all. They said, if you think that you can do this, you're in the program, let's work with you to make this happen. So the industry really went to work, and our crews really went to work with them. And our objective was to help them principally keep safety as their number one priority in this process. We had, at the time, a relatively antiquated system for approval, and we had to get our shop in order too, which meant that we had to streamline and modernize our procedures. We always, in the process, maintain safety as our number one priority. But one of the things that we did that really helped us is we eliminated incredible amounts of duplication that were in our process, and that was really essential for us moving forward. Then the other thing that was really helpful is we worked with the industry to help them understand what they needed to do. That is, they needed to understand our process, they needed to understand the safety culture, and in some of these instances, the individuals we were working with were not as adept at this area and did not understand the safety culture that was needed. And this was a very involved process. And what they did is they went through and really understood where we were, understood the process, and we worked with them at every step of the way. And together, we succeeded with a number of them, and it's more than, I'm going to talk about 4, but there are a number of them. In fact, some of the folks here, Rita Barenwalls is representing another one of our participants that was not within the 4, but had very important contributions. So let's review the 4, and if I could put those slides up. The first slide was Antares. The Antares Nuclear Mark Zero became the first advanced reactor to go critical under the Reactor pilot program on June 4th. So they were very early at Idaho National Laboratory. The Antares concept is a sodium heat pipe cooled microreactor which uses very robust TRISO fuel. And then beyond the initial criticality through the pilot program, they plan to deploy their Mark I electricity producing nuclear test in 27 to demonstrate an integrated performance. So if you could go to the next slide. The next is Valor Atomics Ward 250 microreactor, and it achieved criticality at the Utah San Rafael Energy Lab on June 18th, and that was almost a month before the 4th of July, marking the first DOE-authorized reactor built outside of the National Laboratory. The Ward 250 is a high-temperature gas-cooled reactor which uses robust TRISO fuel. And beyond their initial criticality through the Reactor pilot program, Valor has additional high-power demonstrations planned on the road to commercializing their technology. I should note, during their initial criticality test, they also demonstrated that they can produce electricity and powered a chip that ran a website. So although small, it was a significant step. The next slide, please, which is Deployable Energy's demonstration reactor Unity. It successfully completed a zero-power fueled criticality demonstrated at Idaho National Lab on June 30th. Their concept was a nuclear battery microreactor. And then finally, the next slide. At about 12:19, we're getting down to the wire, on July 4th, Allo Atomics test reactor, Allo-X, successfully completed a zero-power fueled criticality demonstration. The Allo-X reactor is a liquid metal-cooled microreactor which uses the same fuel as the current fleet of light water reactors. Beyond their July 4th criticality, Allo has a full power test planned for 27. The first commercial pod of microreactors is planned for 28. Now, in addition, we've also begun our fuel line pilot program, which is similar to a reactor program, and that we established a fuel line pilot program, and that supports the reactor pilot program and establishes a domestic nuclear fuel supply chain for testing new reactors. There are 4 companies in the active fuel line program, and the first company is Standard Nuclear, and that was authorized to begin production of a high assay, low enriched uranium at its site in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So these have been the initial pilot programs. Now, I might say that there are others waiting in line, and for instance, Rita Barenwall here will talk about Radiant, and some of the companies determined to not go to the July 4th date and decided to concentrate on the technology and the tests that they needed to perform. So it was a mix of different results. I think there has been so much interest in this project that this has led to us institutionalizing something called the launch pad, which we have begun at Idaho National Laboratory. And these projects will continue, and many will prove their ability to generate electricity in the next phase of this activity. I just want to say in conclusion, just a word about safety and some of the activities to assure the Commission of what our priorities are in this program. what we learned and what I think the companies learned, that being safety-minded was the best approach possible. What we found was the companies that learned our regs, understood the nuclear culture, and adopted it on their day-to-day activities and utilized the resources that were available. We had resources from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that came over on detail. We had 12 individuals, and they were extremely helpful in helping these companies, along with our staff, in helping these companies to really do their work. The ones that listened, the ones that followed the regulations, were the ones that moved the quickest. And it really demonstrates that there is no substitute for safety. And if you want speed, the best way to do it is to do it safely and do it according to the regulations. Cutting corners did not work. So in this end, no one was authorized until they did this right and did it correctly. I also have to acknowledge not only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's help in assigning folks to this project for us, and they came as our employees, they were detailed, but also the NNSA provided additional employees to us to also do the same. So this was a very extremely important exercise that demonstrated that this was possible. And the thing that I think that it demonstrated and what it's created is tremendous enthusiasm to the fact that it is possible for the nuclear industry to move forward, and they can move forward with these new products and do it in a way in which is really going to be successful. And I think the Commission has also demonstrated its ability to sort of streamline its regs with an emphasis on safety. And I think together we've been able to demonstrate that this is really going to be a new era. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come today and talk to the Commission.
Thank you very much, Ted. And we'll continue with our next presenter, Ms. Beth Very from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission.
Good morning, Commission and members of the public. My name is Beth Very. I'm the Acting Director General of the Directorate of Advanced Reactor Technologies at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. I'm here today to share the benefits of international collaboration from the CNSC's point of view with respect to advanced reactors. Next slide. Through the presentation outlined here, I'll focus on how international collaboration contributes to our commitment to be an effective and efficient regulator, and I'll highlight the benefits that these relationships deliver. Next slide. The CNSC is Canada's nuclear regulator. Our mandate is to protect the health, safety, and security of people in Canada and to protect the environment through independent, transparent, and effective regulatory oversight of Canada's nuclear sector. Next slide. We achieve our mandate by taking an effective and efficient approach to regulation. Through international collaboration, the CNSC strengthens our regulatory effectiveness and efficiency while protecting people and the environment. Next slide. So how do we do this? The CNSC collaborates with international partners through two primary means: regulator collaboration and international partnerships. For regulator collaboration, the CNSC establishes agreements directly with counterpart regulators. This allows us to exchange expertise, share lessons learned, and address common technical regulatory challenges more effectively and efficiently. The second means is engagement through international partnerships. For example, we actively participate in key NEA, which is Nuclear Energy Agency, and IAEA, which is International Atomic Energy Agency, committees, forums, and technical meetings, specifically the ones that support our priorities. Through these partnerships, we can monitor the regulatory approaches that are being adopted by our counterparts and assess the relevance to our context. We can share Canadian regulatory expertise with emerging nuclear countries, influence the development of international regulatory practices, and support global nuclear safety and Canadian international commitments. Next slide. Let's look a little more closely at a regulator cooperation agreement. First established in 2019, the now trilateral Memorandum of Cooperation between the CNSC, the US NRC, and the United Kingdom's ONR facilitates collaboration between these three regulators, specifically on small modular and advanced reactors. The objective of establishing this Memorandum of Cooperation was to bring regulators together to tackle the common challenges that arise when licensing a first-of-a-kind technology. Next slide. In 2022, the CNSC and NRC formed a working group to assess the BWRX 300 design. There were several projects and joint reviews that were established and completed. There's a list of them on the slide. Looking at one of them in more detail, the last one on the list, the fuel verification and validation, we credit an estimated 8-week reduction in the CNSC's assessment of this topic for the Ontario Power Generation's license application due to the collaboration that we had on this topic. Next slide. Looking further at other benefits, a direct benefit from the collaboration on the BWRX 300 is that it positioned the CNSC to complete the assessment of Ontario Power Generation's license to construct application for the BWRX 300 in 26 months, as opposed to our 32-month service standard, without compromising safety or security. Additional benefits include strengthening transparency, enhanced training opportunities, improved knowledge sharing, and identification and development of administrative tools for continued collaboration. Together, these outcomes support timely, rigorous regulatory reviews and the effective delivery of our mandate. This collaboration is ongoing as well. Next slide. I'll skip this one and go to the last one. In closing, international collaboration is an important tool that helps the CNSC remain an effective and efficient regulator. It strengthens regulatory decision-making, reduces unnecessary duplication of effort, enhances our capabilities, and supports timely and rigorous regulatory reviews. Thank you for your attention, and I'll pass it back to the chairman.
Thank you very much, Beth. George, welcome back to the NRC. We're going to hear from Mr. George Wilson here from TerraPower.
Thank you, Commission, for inviting me here. Slides, please. The next slide, please. So I want to talk about how we evaluated how we started Chimera Unit 1. We really focused on pre-application engagements. We had over 60 pre-application engagements with the NRC because we wanted to de-risk the regulatory process, including writing a bunch of topical reports. We had 15 topical reports. And so our strategy was not just deployment within the U.S., but it's also global deployment outside of the United States. So using the topical reports has a benchmark with more detail for other regulators to look at. So these pre-application engagements that we had, including several training sessions with the NRC staff, the better the staff was prepared to do our review, the more they knew, the faster the reviews went. We also took the feedback. If you look at it, we volunteered for a pre-application readiness assessment, and the NRC staff identified no A gaps. So it shows that the pre-application meetings paid off because we didn't have to add anything additional. So just make sure that you're listening and do open communications. Next slide, please. So Chimera Unit 1, right now we're still focusing on the operating license, which we will submit in March of 28. We're doing the same approach. We've submitted a pre-application engagement plan. We're starting to have pre-application meetings focusing on potential issues. Operator licensing will be the first to go through the operator licensing, looking at some of the fire protection stuff. The additional things that we're looking at is any of the new rule makings that are coming out from the NRC, Part 53, Part 57, how could we utilize it? Would we potentially shift to it? You know, looking at the pros and cons of those rule makings, can we adopt different portions of it in the Part 50? So we are looking at that. The other thing that we're doing is all those topical reports that was approved by the NRC and the construction permit that was issued, we're using that as a basis to do our international deployment. We're actually actively involved in the generic design assessment in the UK with ONR and EA and NWS, and we're actually starting to look at some of the other countries. And we use the basis for the NRC approved documents to start teaching the other regulators how we did the licensing and then show how the NRC does it. So that collaboration is really working well as we look at global deployment. Next slide, please. One of the other things that we did was we were very proactive in the oversight of the construction and vendor assessment. We developed a regulatory oversight group that will actively go out and do NRC type inspections for all the construction, NRC type inspections for all the vendors, and we'll continue doing that. It is our expectations that our pre-inspections will be harder than any one that the NRC will give us, so that hopefully we identify and fix things on our own. An example of this recently is we did a pre-NRC inspection of the QA inspection by the NRC. We were the first advanced reactor to have a full-blown NRC QA inspection, and there was no findings identified based on that pre-assessment. It also allows us to show that we have a very active and proactive corrective action program to identify and fix our own things, which feeds into some of the safety culture. Next slide, please. This is the construction job layout of a recent photo. You can see that the test and fill facility is fully up. We're starting to do excavations in the reactor fabrication building and starting to do trenchments. You can see where the laydown area, the base for the training center. So this is the current status right now at Kimmer Unit 1. Next slide. And when Kimmer U1 is fully built, this will actually be the drawing. This shows you the nuclear island, energy island separation, and this will be the plant. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, George. And next we'll go to Dr. Rita Baranwal from Radiant.
Right. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the Commission for having Radiant here to speak to you. I'm Rita Baranwal, Chief Nuclear Officer. And I want to start out by thanking both the Commission as well as the DOE for the collaborative work that we have seen thus far. We've seen really thoughtful and detailed reviews of our design, had very robust discussions from everyone at headquarters and the national laboratory, so we're very appreciative for that effort from the beginning. Slides, please. Next slide. So Radiant is a company that is focused singularly on one mission. We are the first to test a full power reactor through DOE authorization and then through NRC licensing. We're working through the really complex questions first and in great depth, positioning us to transition faster to commercial deployment. Next slide. Kaleidos is the name of our reactor. It's a 1 megawatt electric reactor, 3.5 megawatts thermal. You can see a few renderings of the reactor itself here inside its operational shielding. It's got a very tight footprint. One reactor requires just 1,500 square feet. The fence line and the shielding allow for it to be located adjacent to the public in urban areas as well as remote communities. Cogeneration of heat allows it to be used for building HVAC operations or other industrial processes. I want to note that there's zero on-site waste, and this is really attractive to many clients. There's no fuel that's left on site. And there's also no water that's used in these operations. So we've got a variety of different benefits that we can offer to clients with this design. And finally, when the reactor has gone through its design life of 20 years, the site is returned to greenfield within 2 years. That's it's another attractive feature for our clients that are looking at this reactor design. Next slide, please. So Radiant, I'm really proud, is a company of firsts. Assistant Secretary Garrish mentioned us in his remarks. We are the first reactor to be tested in DOME. DOME is the demonstration of microreactor experiments at Idaho National Lab. We were selected competitively by the DOE. We are also the first to have a full-scale and full-power operations. We're also the first to have a contract to be the first to deliver to the military. And we're the first to offer an end-to-end solution. We have 84 acres of purchased land that's going to house our manufacturing facilities, and I'll get into that in a moment. Next slide, please. Chairman and Commission, I have to mention that your team operates a very tight ship on getting these slides in for this meeting. I ideally would have liked to have the picture in the bottom right be replaced with the one of the chairman and our president, Tori Shivanandan, on the scissor lift looking in the reactor, but we couldn't get that by the deadline for these slides. So you have here a few pictures of our operation. The reactor itself, we had the White House Chief Technology Officer visit our facilities, as well as the Secretary of the Air Force. Next slide. Assistant Secretary Garrish mentioned that we didn't meet the first 4 criticalities by July 4th, and the reason for that is that we are the only company that is following a very detailed reactor deployment plan. We have a 5-phase plan. The first is to ship and fuel the reactor at dome. The second is to achieve zero power criticality. The third step is to operate at 1 megawatt thermal. The fourth step is to ramp up to full power and full temperature. And the fifth step, the most important in this deployment schedule, is to operate for 150 hours continuously without any operator intervention. So standard power ascension test for a new nuclear power plant. This is really important to Radiant because we do intend to deploy these reactors commercially. All of these phases will be completed this year in the dome at Idaho National Laboratory. We're testing fuel that matches that of our commercial deployments. The first tranche of fuel has already been shipped and received by Idaho National Lab. And then we're also testing the control and safety systems at full power, including how this system handles heat. Next slide. So this just shows you the dome itself and our team setting up the dome for our prototype campaign. What you see with these two folks here in the foreground is our heat rejection system that is located just outside of dome. Next slide. So we are the first and only microreactor company that is working to fuel our own reactors under the Part 70 review by the NRC. We have construction that is underway with our teams working 6 days a week. And you can see some of that in the upper left image. And then if you jump to the image that's in the lower right, this is the completed 300,000 square foot facility that will be commissioned in 2028. Our fueling facility will be complete earlier, by early next year, under the NRC Part 70 license that we are working with your team on. Next slide. We will be the first to power customers. So first we go to full power in Dome this year. Then we turn on at our first customer, which is at Buckley Space Force Base in 2028. And then beyond that, we'll be the first to achieve scale thanks to that Part 70 license that we are eagerly anticipating by January of next year. So let me talk for a minute about the DOE authorization and the NRC licensing plan. So we very much appreciate the collaboration that we have seen with NRC, and we know, especially as Assistant Secretary Garrish mentioned, that many of your team have been detailed to the DOE, and we at Radiant have actually appreciated the observations that we have seen from the members of your staff for our preliminary design review, and I know a lot of work has been going on in the background for the review of our design documented safety analysis as well. So the challenge is that DOE and NRC use different regulations, terminology, and licensing formats. And without coordination, the same safety analyses, QA evidence, and readiness activities may be reformatted and reviewed multiple times. So the objective that I think all of the agencies are in line with and was outlined in the Executive Order 14300 is to have one safety case, to have independent regulatory decisions without any unnecessary duplication. So there's some commonalities. You've got the DOE DSA and the NRC Joint Construction Permit Operating License FSAR. You've got a DOE Readiness Review that is an analog to the NRC's Operational Readiness Review. common QA process programs across design, manufacturing, testing, and operations, and then NRC observation of DOE-authorized assembly, testing, readiness, and operations. So a proposed approach, as we all move forward in leveraging the DOE authorization in our NRC licensing activities as we move ahead, is to develop one comprehensive safety case for all regulations, to maintain one accident analysis, one QA program, one design basis, and a supporting technical record. It's to use regulator-specific appendices to crosswalk DOE, NRC, and DOW requirements, and it's to allow each regulator to focus on unique requirements and independent statutory findings. So I'm going to end with an example of a review model, and that would be something like DOE performs the initial review for first deployment, NRC and DOW observe key meetings, audits, inspections, and operational activities. DOE's safety evaluation later informs later reviews. NRC and DOW reference prior technical findings where appropriate and focus on regulatory differences rather than repeating the full analysis. So thank you for your time. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you today.
Thank you very much, Rita, and welcome another former NRC staffer back here, Nader Mamish from Westinghouse. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to discuss Westinghouse's plans to support deployment of the AP1000 plant design. Next slide. Momentum continues to build for new nuclear deployment in support of Executive Order 14302, and today I will discuss Westinghouse's efforts to enable safe, efficient, and repeatable AP1000 deployment. Specifically, I will highlight our initiatives to enhance licensing efficiency for future applicants in the NRC, to strengthen and expand our supply chain capabilities, and identify policy areas where additional regulatory certainty could further support efficient deployment. Together, these efforts position Westinghouse to support deployment levels that could exceed the goals outlined in Executive Order 14302. Next slide. As you know, Westinghouse submitted Revision 20 of the AP1000 DCD to the NRC on March 27th, and the NRC accepted the application for review the following month. Revision 20 aligns the certified design with the Vogtle Unit 4 plant and reflects the successful resolution of the first-of-a-kind construction and operational challenges. Because the changes incorporated into Vogtle Unit 4 plant were implemented through an NRC-approved licensing process, Revision 20 primarily serves to codify these approved changes into the certified design. We appreciate the NRC's consideration and recognition of this maturity and its efforts to pursue an efficient review process. Consistent with that approach, Westinghouse believes that Revision 20 is well suited for incorporation into the regulations through a direct final rulemaking reflecting the maturity, stability, and proven performance of the design. Once approved, Revision 20 will provide the licensing foundation for deployment of an AP1000 fleet. By incorporating lessons learned from Vogtle, Revision 20 should enable future combined license reviews to focus primarily on site-specific and safety-significant considerations. Because the NRC remains the global benchmark for nuclear safety, the benefits of Revision 20 of the AP1000 design certification extend beyond the United States. An updated AP1000 design certification will not only reinforce U.S. nuclear leadership, but also facilitate international deployment efforts consistent with the ADVANCE Act, Executive Order 14302, and broader U.S. foreign policy objectives. Next slide. The AP1000 benefits from mature and established supply chains supported in large part by the stability and standardization of the plant design. Building on the recently announced DOE Office of Energy Dominance conditional loan commitment, Westinghouse is expanding supply chain capabilities to support large-scale AP1000 fleet deployment. Our strategy focuses on 3 areas: people, process, and partnership. A resilient supply chain requires both qualified suppliers and a skilled workforce. Westinghouse is investing in workforce development through internal training programs and partnerships with educational institutions to strengthen the nuclear talent pipeline. Our buy where we build approach combines local sourcing with global supplier network, enhancing supply chain resilience, strengthening project execution, and leveraging advanced technologies to enhance efficiency, safety, and quality. In addition, Westinghouse is strengthening supplier capabilities and long-term partnerships to promote nuclear safety, quality, and trust throughout the industry. Next slide. Following DOE's conditional loan commitment announcement, Westinghouse is actively preparing to support deployment of an AP1000 fleet consistent with the objectives of Executive Order 14302. Regulatory clarity is a critical enabler of successful nuclear projects because it allows licensees, investors, and suppliers to better understand, manage, and reduce project risk. We appreciate the NRC's efforts to develop advanced reactor construction oversight process, or RCOP, and its decision to extend the RCOP applicability to AP1000 projects. For a mature design such as the AP1000, additional guidance regarding construction activities would provide greater certainty and improve project execution. For its part, Westinghouse is applying lessons learned from the construction of Vogtle Units 3 and 4 to drive standardization, continuity, and improved execution across AP1000 projects. Construction flexibility remains important, and Tier 2 star information continues to constrain the efficient implementation of improvements. We appreciate the Commission's ongoing efforts to modernize and improve the regulatory framework, including Parts 53 and 57. Westinghouse believes that a mature Part 52 certified designs, such as the AP1000, should benefit from the risk-informed change processes, and that removing Tier 2 star categories would increase flexibility and enable efficient implementation of construction improvements across a fleet of projects. Next slide. Westinghouse is committed to working with the NRC to leverage the proven AP1000 design, a mature supply chain, and a modernized regulatory framework to enable the safe, efficient, and repeatable deployment of a new generation of nuclear power plants. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be pleased to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Nader. And then we'll conclude our external panel with Ms. Jennifer Wheeler from X-Energy. Yes, X-Energy.
Yes, both. All the above. Thank you for the invitation to be here to talk with you today. So if we could go to the slides, I'll try to be very efficient. I have lots of pictures. Next slide. Okay, so we have 3 U.S. deployments that we're working on right now. The first is the project that I'm directly involved with. TRISO-X is a wholly owned subsidiary of X-Energy and is the fuel company to fuel the XC100 reactors. We are constructing in Tennessee, and I have some more pictures of that in a minute. And I'm happy to share that we just received an $11 million economic development grant from the state of Tennessee that was announced last week that goes towards our first several projects in Tennessee related to fuel. The second project is part of what we are working with the Department of Energy for both the fuel project and Project Longmont in Texas under the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. Thank you very much. Our 50-50 partnership is very important to both of these projects. And we are in the CPA phase for Project Longmont, I believe, and working towards our final SER in the next few months, and then on towards CPA. The third project is with Amazon, and they are looking to add reactors on a multi-year phased approach, the first of which would be sited in Washington State. Next slide. We also have one international deployment that we signed an agreement last fall with Centrica, an energy utility in the UK, and we are in early stages working with them on projects that they may want to develop that may include both reactors and fuel. Next slide. So just a reminder, TRISO fuel, we have based our fuel product for the XE100 on the decades of work done by the Department of Energy. So we are very much like the AGR product and the work that went with that, testing included. We felt that was very important to go with that out of the gate because there's a lot of work behind it. So we are trying to commercialize what the goal of the DOE work was. Next slide. So this is the project that I'm directly working on. Our team in Oak Ridge is working on construction. This picture was from last week. So even between when Commissioner Marzano visited in February and Commissioner Wright visited in November, we have a building now, which is very exciting. We don't have anything inside yet, but even walking inside is exciting. So we did start construction for site prep in October of 2024. We moved to begin vertical construction, I think actually right after Commissioner Wright's visit last fall. And our license was approved by your staff in February. So we are in the construction phase. Next slide. This is an aerial view. In the upper left is the campus for our first commercial building that was licensed by your staff. The lower right is actually a laboratory facility, which I'll talk about in a minute. So our campus is separated by some green space, but on the same street, so pretty nice location-wise. Next slide. So where we're headed from here on the main campus, TX1 is the first production building. That's what we're working on right now. That capacity annually is 5 metric tons uranium of product, which is roughly 715,000 pebbles a year. That supports 11 XE100 reactors in steady state. TX2 is about 4 times as big. Both of these facilities are covered under our current NRC license. We were able to plan ahead for that, so thank you. Second building is 20 MTU, roughly 3 million pebbles a year, and that supports 44 XE100 reactors. We are very quickly moving towards, when you add in Amazon, their full order may be, and Centrica, we're going to be beyond TX1 and TX2 at some point sooner than later. So we'll see where that goes. Next slide. So this is just an aerial view of what I was showing you. The left-hand side is our main campus, and our laboratory is right in the middle of this slide. Roughly moving ourselves with all 3 of these facilities close to 1,700 jobs in the next 4 to 5 years, if everything stays on schedule. Last slide. So our laboratory facility, we have been in leased space at Oak Ridge National Lab since 2016, doing research and development that's done refining of the work that DOE did in the AGR program. And we're looking to site a permanent home for that facility. So we were able to buy another 15 or 20 acres down the street from ourselves, and are working towards building the facility on the right-hand side, where we will then be able to move our equipment that is at ORNL over to this facility and continue a very important fuel research and development for ourselves, but also others as they may desire. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Now we will proceed to questions from the commission. And Commissioner Wright, you get to start first.
I get to start today. Very good. Well, thank you very much. Good morning. And let me extend my warmest welcomes for me and my commissioners, my colleagues here, to have this distinguished panel here. This is it's good to see several of you again. Meet you for the very first time, Beth, and it's always good to see Nader come back in the building. I can't imagine they give you a key. I don't. Yeah, so thank you. So the work that you're doing to advance the safe deployment of advanced reactor technology, it's going to shape this nation for years to come. We all know, we recognize that, and we're all working very hard to make that a reality. It's a great day, and it's going to impact the world for many years. So I really appreciate your insights here because y'all have been on the front line from the beginning on this. Jennifer, I'm going to start with you this morning. You know, fuel is big. Then it doesn't matter what kind of designs we have. If we can't provide the fuel for it, it just doesn't matter. So, so a strong domestic fuel cycle is going to be foundational for any revival here in the United States or anything else. I mean, enriched capacity, advanced fuel designs, and the back end. We're going to need workable solutions for all of it. I'm kind of interested to, because we've been engaged for a long time with you, what's your view of the NRC's evolution over the last 5 years-ish when it comes to the safe and efficient licensing of fuel facilities? You know, how has it evolved?
Well, that's a good question. And I could even go back to say, let's talk about 26 years, because that's my time I've only ever worked with NMSS staff. And while people have changed over the years, you know, the regulations for Part 70 have been largely the same through that whole time frame. But I think really, if you focus on the last few years, you know, anybody who came first with a new fuel facility, and ours, you know, was the first new fuel facility licensed in 50 years, was going to have a challenge to prepare the information that NRC needed, but then also for NRC to kind of revive the muscle memory of how to do an extensive review. You know, while there were several enrichment facility licenses that came in the 2005-ish plus or minus timeframe, it had been a while. So we went in with that in mind. We hired very experienced people from fuel cycle facilities to our team, me included, but not me by myself, for the purpose of making sure that we were preparing a very quality product that we knew had worked at the various fuel cycle facilities we had worked at and worked with NRC staff, so that hopefully gave NRC a leg up on at least, okay, we've got something good to work with here, then let's work through the review. I think that there are a couple of issues that we're still working together on. Anybody that comes after us, hopefully will have a little bit more efficiency of review, because we're all back in the practice of what it is we need to talk about. I think that this rulemaking is a chance to memorialize some of the things that happened with our review, some of the exemptions that several facilities had gotten through time and not having to recreate that wheel again. So I think, you know, we're headed in a good direction.
Okay, thank you so much. Because you have been very, very involved, and you've been unafraid to share things that we needed to hear, and I thank you for that over the years. George, I'm going to come to you next, and I'm going to finish, I hope, with, if I have time, with Ted and Rita for a second. So it's been a privilege to watch everything that's been going on with Natrium. It's, you know, I've had several of our commissioners have already been out there. I haven't been there yet, but I'm coming soon, I hope. And I'd like to hear a little bit, and some of the things that you said, I wanted to get to this first. The importance of pre-application engagement. I really would love to hear a little bit about how long you thought that part was for you and how it changed over time. Can you give me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we, when I evaluated the licensing strategy, we looked at first of a kinds, or we thought crosswalks, because we were doing a brand new technology, a sodium fast reactor. We developed a strategy. The NRC had a roadmap that had, hey, you should talk about certain things for pre-application engagement, have these papers in, and then we expounded on it. The first thing I wanted to do was to give the basis of the staff how our plant worked so that they could, when we started the interactions, they would have to have a basis and we could get questions. The NRC made comments. We wrote those comments down. If the pre-application meeting didn't end well, then we would schedule another one. And then we kept building on those. We were the first ones to get a separation of the energy island, nuclear island, volcanic hazards, a GURB isolator that the vessel sets in, first one to use the cloud to doing safety analysis cases. So the pre-application meetings worked well. The NRC would tell us concerns, we would address those concerns, and then we would use an electronic reading room to put the submittals up so that they could look at them, and then we would submit them. And then I'll open questions with the public. So I plan on doing that with the OL. We have some areas that go through. I had a lot of pre-application meetings, so to be honest with you, I'm still looking, was it cost effective? Because my bosses are making me evaluate, was it cost effective? But I think we got out of it what I needed to. So if one of the good things is when you walk out of that pre-application meeting in the second or third, we have a joint understanding of what the NRC staff wants and what I want, or things that we're going to stand in. So they were very beneficial, and I plan on continuing to do them. And I actually took that over to ONR and started pre-application gap assessments with the UK regulator because I think they're a great tool.
And I hope you've seen improvement from our side as this progressed from the start.
Yes, and we actually shared lessons learned with your staff. I did a lessons learned from the CP issuance, and we actually shared lessons learned from pre-application agreement and through the reviews with your staff.
Thank you. And one other thing that you talked about, and I was going to ask you about this, are others, other designers or other potential applicants here, Radiant, anybody else, are they asking you about your defense in depth approach that you have implemented?
We'll share as long as it's not commercial sensitive. We'll share around the approach that we do if someone comes. I know there's a lot of ex-NRC people now out in the industry, so they call and I do give mentoring, give advice. So yeah, we'll share on the process that we do that and then show the charts, because it makes it very easy if you have a chart to show, hey, if this breaks, I have this. So we'll share if they come and ask.
The fact that you shared it here today is it sounds like a really good idea potentially. And, thank you for sharing that, because if it's working, that's great, So thank you. So I got time to come to Ted. Ted, it's great to see you again. I can't imagine how you sleep at all, because you're just busy 24/7, 365 right now. And Rita, it's good to see you here as well. I'm going to, both of you may participate in this part of it here. So NRC and DOE interaction on the pilot program is something I've been invested in since last year when I was chair, and I think that, in my opinion, we positioned both organizations well to succeed in our respective roles. So, Ted, now that we've had some runtime with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you think that shared vision has been realized, and are anything that we need to do going forward to improve on it?
Well, I think when I think back when we started and where we are today, I think we made substantial progress. And a couple of things have happened. I think we've learned more about the process of authorization, and hopefully the folks at the NRC have looked at us and seen some of the advantages of why we can be helpful in some of the work that they're doing. I do think the thing that has helped us the most is it really challenged our people. and our people really stood up to the challenge. The thing that's important to me is when I look at the lab, this coalesced the lab for us. I think it really made them a better organization in terms of being able to do these kinds of tasks. So I think it was really good from that standpoint. And it also made the joint relationship between us and the lab stronger. And I think that has really been good. And when I look at the various labs, I think Idaho has really excelled in this process. I'm hopeful that the folks that have come back, that are about to come back, that have learned more about us so that they can understand what we're doing. To me, I think I feel the same as I did originally. When we do work, let's try not to duplicate it again. In other words, let's try to take advantage of that as you go forward. But the thing I think that's been most helpful is I think that the companies have learned what it is that they need to do a better job when they get to see you. I mean, I think that process, what we have done is basically help educate the industry as to what it needs to do. And this was a group that's not the traditional utility industry. This is a different crowd, and it's different people. And they're extremely good at what they do, but they're not used to the nuclear culture and what has to be done to make this go forward. So I think the biggest advantage is that we've taken people that want to get into this business, and I think we've helped train them as to what is needed and how to do this, and to do it now in a bigger sense when they get to you, and really do it right. So that's a good part.
I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners just to indulge me here. Don't read it a follow-up. So given that you're on the applicant side of this, is there anything you'd like to add to what maybe Ted said, or maybe what your experience has been like?
Sure. So I will supplement what Assistant Secretary Garrish said, because there are some of us who have been in the industry for decades, but we are. I would agree that we are an exception. And so we do understand the nuclear culture, and we do understand what is expected of us when we come to the regulator. Radiant is very appreciative of the patience that DOE and the embedded, detailed NRC experts and the national laboratories have exhibited when working with us through our application process. It has helped Radiant grow and become more robust as a company, so very, very appreciative for that. As we look forward and extend that experience to continuing to work with the NRC and the DOW, I'll emphasize that we're looking forward to not duplicating efforts unnecessarily. And we do feel, since we are already working with those three agencies, that we at Radiant can use Kaleidos as this poster child to lead the way and demonstrate to the industry that this actually can be done and is more than just something that's written in an executive order.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright. Commissioner Kroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning. It's been an enjoyable presentation and got my mind working in many different ways, more than my time will allow to get into. A couple comments off the top, and then I hope to get through maybe 5 questions with you all. First, welcome to Jody Martin. This is his first commission meeting as Secretary of the Commission, the true NRC glutton for punishment. Thank you for all that you've done in various capacities around here. And second, and I speak somewhat on behalf of Commissioner Wright, but everyone just wanted to just note the passing of Senator Graham, who is obviously a big supporter of nuclear. I think probably everyone in here has worked with him in his office in various capacities, including myself, in pleasant ways and in less pleasant ways. And I'll just say MOX to Ted and others who know what I'm talking about. But I found he and his staff always acted with honesty and integrity and professionalism, and that is somewhat of a lost art these days, and he will be missed in that regard. That being said, Assistant Secretary Garrish, if I can start with you, help me, or help all of us kind of explain to those who are listening, the public and otherwise, can you put criticality in context of the milestones reached with the 4 reactor developers? What does criticality mean to the average person? Because it's not electrons on the grid. So could you explain that?
Well, I'm not sure that the average person really does understand what we're doing. The thing, though, that what I believe it should mean is this is the first time that we expose the environment to full operation, even though it may be small in this particular case. But this is this is really the essential first step in full operation. And there's then from there it's application. So this is really, to me, is really the full operation of the reactor.
With that in mind, can you help maybe enlighten all of us how DOE's PDSA and DSA compare to NRC licensing milestones? I know some people seem to be under the impression that they are the same from different agencies. Can you help provide a little bit of distinction?
Well, they're not the same, and they're not as complete. In other words, we do have a more practical approach, I think, to making these work. And I think the important thing is these are tests. This is research. This is not full operation of a large 300 megawatt or 1,000 megawatt reactor. So that is a very different sort of consideration. In other words, we are sort of preliminarily determining that there is sufficient safety in these that we can move forward. And I think it is a different thing, and we really need to recognize that. And we need to recognize, as important as criticality is, in other words, it demonstrates the ability to do this. These reactors that were started were relatively modest in terms of size. And I think, in other words, we understand that in a couple of instances, when we determined how we were going to prove a particular point, we really reduced the power so that it was done with the idea of how can you demonstrate this safely, and we do it in a manner in which it is done with the least power that's necessary to demonstrate the point. And then there's a series of tests that go on as we become more confident in this reactor to move it into a larger setting. And I think that that's what we do and that's the help that we can provide. And so it's a different sort of thing that we're doing. In other words, I think we're helping the reactor companies understand the reactor and the reactions of the reactor to the physics, and moving it forward in a way that then can lead to the larger work that you do.
But to be clear, there are safety significant factors outside or above and beyond the DOE's documented safety analysis that are necessary before a reactor moves to commercial operation, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to stick with you for a second here. What is the role of either you as Assistant Secretary of Nuclear Energy, Office of Nuclear Energy, or other leadership at the department in ensuring that corners were not cut and all regulations were applied appropriately? You mentioned that you feel confident that that's the case. How do you know? What do you do to ensure that from your position?
We have federal employees that I work with on a daily basis, and my staff works with on a daily basis, the reactor division, and they live with these folks in Idaho. So they know exactly what's going on. In other words, this is not a distant relationship. It is Idaho, and we're in Washington, and they report back to me and tell me exactly what's going on, but they actually live with these folks. So this is a hands-on operation, and it is, in many senses, sometimes I hear about it, the reactions are negative from the companies. They say we are too manipulative in terms of what we're suggesting and requiring. So I hear that more than I hear any other activity. I hear a lot of positives from the folks, but what I hear the most are the complaints from the companies. And to me, that is a sign that this is working, and also to me is a sign of the the independent thinking of the folks that are in this job. The people that we have in this job, I have tremendous confidence in, will not do anything for the sake of just because some reactor company wants to do it. They have integrity beyond belief, in my judgment, sometimes almost too much. In other words, these are test reactors, but I have to tell you, I've just been incredibly impressed with the folks on this, and they tell me what they believe, and in a nuclear culture, the person on the ground is who you have to believe.
Thank you.
I'm not going to override them because if they're making a judgment on the safety of that reactor, they are on the ground, they understand it. I don't. So I have to rely on them, but I have the highest confidence in these people.
Yeah, and given your background, both technical background and legal background, you're well suited to make sure all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. So thank you for what you do. George, I'm not going to ask you a question, but I will tell you that I'm not an economist, but I could probably guarantee you that the cost-effective evaluation of pre-application activity is going to show that it is definitely more cost-effective than not doing pre-application. Dr. Barenwall, first I'm going to sheepishly admit that I've been pronouncing your last name wrong for a long time without the AN in the middle, so I'll correct that going forward. Your guys' technology is very promising and interesting. Thank you for all that you're doing to help bring that to fruition safely. You mentioned in your presentation that there's no waste left on site. So what is the waste profile of the project, and where does the waste go? And take me through the back end of your fuel cycle.
So our current model is that we refuel about every 5 years. And in that, the reactor is returned to our facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and we refuel it there, and we store the used fuel in dry casks at that facility.
So it's returned to the facility with irradiated fuel still in the reactor, and then it's dispositioned there into some sort of dry casks?
Correct.
And without getting too technical, how does the waste profile stack up to traditional waste from large light water reactors?
In terms of volume, it is much, much smaller. We're a 1 megawatt.
Yeah. How about in radioactivity?
I am not prepared to share that at the moment. Yeah.
I do say, just in general, I think it's an area that would, from NRC, DOE, whoever's perspective, a lot more work is needed to look at what the waste profiles of advanced reactors are. And yes, there's a volume benefit for a variety of obvious reasons, but the radioactivity and the best disposition, be it dry cask, intermediate, permanent disposal, we need to understand those things so we can figure out the path forward. For anyone here, and I'll make this my last question, but outside, and Beth, I apologize, but outside of Canada and the UK, what have been recent experiences working with international regulators in terms of their perspective on what the U.S. via the NRC or DOE is doing to reform and modernize the reactor licensing process and make the deployment process more efficient while maintaining safety? Are there concerns from some of our traditional partners, either because they don't fully understand what we're undertaking, or it's too voluminous, or the politics gets in the way? I just looking for some anecdotal experience of working with international regulators. George?
Yeah, we've started working with the South Korean regulators, and I've reached out to OIP and to ONR. Whatever.
We don't know it either.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
we're
I don't
figuring it
know
out
the
too.
new
Yeah.
acronyms of the advanced reactors, to try to develop a correlation and a relationship with the South Korean regulators and the NRC regulators, because it's going to be crucial for deployment. They don't fully understand some of the new methodologies like NEI 1804. So there has to be training and collaboration done so that the other regulators can fully understand the processes and where the NRC is going. And, you know, we're pushing for that, and we're actually doing crosswalks and training. But they are looking to see, are there relaxations? Where are they coming from? But it's going to be key to develop the relationships with the NRC and the other regulators so if they feel comfortable, because it is our plan to use the NRC's licensing for like our construction permit as a basis and an OL. So that collaboration, just like with Canada and the UK, becomes critical.
Anybody else have anything that they want to add? Don't feel obligated, but Nader, please.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Certainly, we've been working with PAA through the Polish regulator, through PEJ, our Polish client. We've conducted some training for PAA involving the AP1000 safety features. I've been led to believe that PAA is continuing to monitor the NRC's changes to its regulations, and we've supported them and supported PEJ as appropriate to help them understand some of the changes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And thank you to my colleagues for the extra time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Cole. Commissioner Marzano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. And I'm very pleased to have this group here, especially each of you who brings a unique perspective to the advanced reactor landscape conversation we're having today. So the ambitious targets in both domestically and internationally for new nuclear energy have catalyzed unprecedented innovation across technologies, business models, and deployment strategies, as we have heard today. Yet the scale and urgency of these ambitions also mean that each of us, representing our distinct roles within the industry, must respond in ways that are equally unprecedented. Achieving our stated goals demands an all-hands-on-deck approach where we must embrace collaboration and cooperation while upholding the highest standards of safety and public confidence. So I really appreciate Rita Ted mentioning just how important that is to the pilot program and will be moving forward. Success, in my opinion, will not only be defined by the number of projects that move forward, but whether they do so without compromising the principles that define our industry's credibility and trustworthiness. So the NRC is now close to finalizing the full suite, or issuing the full suite of rulemaking proposals that we began in response to EO 14300. And many of these efforts will directly impact each of you at the table, shaping the future regulatory environment in which you operate. So I appreciate hearing your insights on how our innovation is shaping your strategies and how early interactions have helped guide your progress and what challenges or opportunities you see on the horizon as we move forward. So actually, I do want to kind of really hone in real quick on some of the innovations that we have been kind of pursuing here, particularly under Part 50. And so I kind of had it as a goal in mind to really communicate how each of the licensing pathways that we've pursued changes under should be used and kind of establish some guidance there. And so in particular, George, I want to talk to you about Part 50 licensing. So the Part 50 process being a two-step process, what we've seen play out is that there is an early milestone that can be achieved as the design matures and the project moves forward. Some of the changes in Part 50, what we've done is to make Part 50 more technology neutral, is to remove the prescriptive requirements for large light water reactors such that this two-step process can better serve advanced reactors that may cut down on some of that pre-application engagement that may be required, other than kind of familiarizing our staff. I am very interested to hear what those cost savings were, by the way. But aside from that, from your perspective, how should we think about our current regulatory frameworks from Part 50 to Part 57, and how are these structured in a way that supports the kind of design evolution that's going to continue with these first-of-a-kind projects?
Yeah, so we've actually evaluated not so much Part 57, because I can't use Part 57 because I have too much fuel, unless you remove that constraint, and then I'll relook at it a little harder. But so we look at the rules and look at the pros and cons. I also look at the regulatory basis that's in the rule to see if I can adopt it and where I'm at. So we're really looking hard at Part 53 because we use the LMP process, which is actually the backbone of Part 53. And I do pros and cons, and I look at that because there are some fleet approaches to Part 53 that, you got to look long-term and you've got to look short-term. So it's evaluated. I think there's some plus and minuses. I also know we were the industry leaders for going through the LMP process, and so the staff learns as we learn, right? It's a new process. All the regulatory documents are not ready, the guidance documents. And so it's very key that you do lessons learned and then you go back and incorporate those lessons learned and make it more efficient and more effective. That's key. That's the reason we shared our lessons learned with the staff. So hopefully they'll look at that and they'll take some of the guidance documents. So, and some of the rulemakings, like with Part 53, an example, there's a chemical hazard association, but there's no guidance for that yet. So you would have to work through it. So, we evaluate them. I look to see if there's efficiencies and effectiveness. Can I try to adapt that one thing and bring it into where I'm at? Or would it make sense to holistically just change my licensing process and swap over to Part 53? So I have lots of spreadsheets. I still like paper, and I do pros and cons when I go through it. So I can give you the pros and cons, not here, but we are working with the staff on that. So I do evaluate everything that you do, and then, even look at, like with Part 51, some of the changes might make the states the long pole in the tent to do environmental licensing. It will no longer be the NRC. It'll actually be the state regulations. So we look all of it, and I have to not only look at deployment for the U.S., I actually look at deployment globally because it is our company's goal to deploy globally. So some of the changes would not potentially be good for me globally that were done. So I would look at it and say, no, I want to keep what you're doing because I need that NRC base review to go to another country.
I really appreciate some of those insights, and Rita, I do want to hear your perspective again on, we are working towards issuing and changing our core licensing processes without compromising safety, but to some of the process efficiencies I think that the Department of Energy has been able to achieve. So your perspective.
So I'll speak to our eager anticipation of Part 57 being issued as a final rule. I've told a few of you that we feel that much of the language in the proposed Part 57 rule has been taken straight out of Radiant's playbook. So we're very appreciative to see the feedback that we provided in preparation of that rule coming out as a proposed rule, to see that in writing. Very much appreciative of it addressing the fact that there is a different pathway that is needed for low-dose consequence reactors, and that there are considerations for a reactor that is going to be mobile and can be transported as long as it has features to prevent criticality. So we're very appreciative of seeing all of that in this proposed rule. I think it's going to benefit all of the microreactor sector, and we are actually, right after this meeting, we're starting our pre-application conversations in anticipation, again, of what that rule is going to look like.
Excellent. Yeah. Stay tuned on that one. Well, I'm fortunate to have Beth and George here, these two panelists that for a panel that we held at the RIC on construction efficiency. And so maybe it's a good opportunity to kind of check in from where, that discussion to now. Beth, especially with the Darlington project kind of starting to move apace. So if there's any learnings that I think are important to share in this forum right now, I invite you to do so, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me again. Good to see you. The Darlington New Nuclear Project is progressing. We have released the first hold point of three. First of three have been released. So the construction continues. That first hold point allowed for the installation of the base mat for the reactor building and the subsequent construction of the containment. So when I understand that there's some folks from the commission going to site next week, so you'll be able to see see the latest progress there. It's very impressive. We'll continue to work on the verification that the subsequent hold points are ready for release.
Was there anything unexpected to come out of that hold point review? Was there any kind of specific challenge that,
It was fairly straightforward. It's, I guess, it is the aspect of it that is maybe perhaps a bit different for us is that the construction timeline does change. As things happen on site, the schedule gets adjusted, and so being adaptable to the schedule and when that base mat would be ready to be installed was something that we worked with on TerraPower generation to understand the timing of that. So that was one new aspect, I would say. Yeah.
well, along the lines of construction, Jennifer, I appreciate the invite, and it's very impressive to see the progress that's out there. Speaking to some of the programs going on at Department of Energy, it is the reactor pilots and how those are going to progress through the launch pad, but we have the fuel pilot project as well. So there is a concept here where those facilities will become NRC licensed. So based on your experience now, having been in construction, what are some of the things that those folks should be thinking about in anticipation of NRC licensing?
The expectations for the level of licensee oversight of construction are very high, as they should be. I think we underestimated how much oversight we needed to provide of our contractors. And that's a lesson everybody needs to know and hear it again and again and again. We're hearing it again and again and again to ourselves. Contractors have their job to do, but ultimately it's the licensee's responsibility to make sure that we are meeting the commitments that we've made through the licensing process. Meet the design requirements, do the inspections that are required, document all the above, be ready for NRC to come in and inspect and meet those needs. So,
well, I'm running low on time. I just want to make one quick point here. Congress has long recognized from a bipartisan perspective, kind of some of the gaps, structural gaps in the way that we've been approaching nuclear energy in this country. So the passage of both the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act and Nuclear Energy Innovation Modernization Act really kind of set the groundwork for what is happening right now. And the pilot program and everything that the department, along with our help, has really put that vision into practice. It is truly remarkable that we've been able to achieve what we have in such a short time. I think that needs to continue. I think our cooperation of the NRC in these activities needs to continue. Yes, I think we will continue to have an observation role, but I have concern about, again, getting our folks down into the details. Managing conflicts of interest when things come back, when those folks return to us. But in an effort to avoid duplication, I think that we really need to be paying attention to the certification of the tests, the data, the experiments that are underpinning, the analyses that are going into that. So, I think what I'd like to do, and kind of how we pointed out, what Jennifer has just mentioned about the fuel line pilots, is our continued cooperation, but in a much more kind of fulsome way. Similar to how we've had our folks help support reviews. So I think that's very important. And lastly, I'll say I appreciate our international collaboration, Beth. I think it's well worth the investment, and I hope that we can continue to do it. It's just, again, for the technologies that are coming, when the countries can kind of combine their capacities, we can see some real savings and good results that come from that process. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Marzano. Commissioner Weaver.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank all of the panelists for coming this morning. Also congratulate you. Every one of you has had a number of successes, and for those companies that aren't represented, it was also had a number of successes. Some of my colleagues have already talked about the pace of innovation and some of the really fabulous things that are happening. When I first heard about this idea last spring of 4 reactors going critical or whatever the target was, I was pretty skeptical. And just, Ted, as you suggested, maybe you were as well. But looking beyond that now, and I guess I'm going to ask Rita and then maybe Ted, if you want to chime in as well, the role and importance of testing at power in support of that transition to commercial operation and deployment. Could you speak to that a little bit?
So our plan at Radiant had always been to test at full power and full temperature in Dome. We wanted to use that test bed to its full capacity. But more importantly, it was very crucial to the company to be able to test the thing that we are going to commercialize. I mentioned that we are going to deploy at Buckley Space Force Base, and it is important that they receive a reactor that has been robust, whose design has been robustly tested. Dome allows us to do that. And while I do not want to at all minimize the accomplishments of those that have achieved all of their milestones to date, it's a huge, huge accomplishment for the industry. It is great progress, and huge kudos to the leadership at DOE and the entire team within DOE, the Idaho National Lab, and the NRC team that has been detailed to them. But it is very important to our company that we demonstrate the prototypic reactor that we are going to deliver to our customers. It's imperative that we do that. So we are testing our prototypic fuel, in our prototypic coolant, at our prototypic power. All three are going to be demonstrated in Dome this summer.
Before you submit a license to the NRC, a
Yes.
license application?
Yes.
Did you want to add anything?
Well, what I would tell you is I agree totally with what Rita just explained, and I think Dome is one of our really critical assets that we have available. And Radiant will do their testing, and then they'll move on. And we're going to then open that up to other reactors. And this is a very important point in terms of the process, and that's as full power for these smaller reactors, really important. So that's our plan. That's what we're going to do. And we're about to come out with asking applicants now to come in and tell us, and we'll select some to move on to our next stage. Very important. I agree totally with what Rita just said.
Yeah, I think it's important that they, test that power. I'm sure they're going to learn some things, right? And may have to tweak their design before they submit an application to the NRC. So, thank you. Beth, you talked a little bit about some of the savings and efficiencies that have gained through our collaboration. If you look into the future, how far can we go?
Well, looking into the future, we are a life cycle regulator, so we do foresee this international collaboration with the NRC to continue for the life cycle of the plant. There's a lot of potential there, given that we now have experience with the inspection during construction. So we'll be sharing that with the Memorandum of Cooperation team shortly. So there's the collaborations get identified as they become relevant. So it's hard to say exactly what future collaborations will look like. At the moment, some future collaborations are, like I said, the construction inspections, and potentially other technologies that present themselves through our license to prepare site applications that we have in front of us today. We have 3 license to prepare site applications that are, they have not selected their technology yet. They're using a bounding approach with a plant parameter envelope that is based on a certain subset of technologies that they're considering, but they have not yet selected the technology. But once that does happen, then we may then propose some additional collaborations with the NRC.
Thank you. George, I'm going to turn to you for a moment. As your company's gone through licensing and into construction, I actually have 2 questions for you. One, I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you develop and maintain a strong nuclear safety culture through that process. And then you had mentioned some of the oversight that the company is providing ahead of NRC oversight. And you particularly mentioned that you'd did some vendor check on your vendors. If you could speak to what did you find? Are they generally in good shape, need a lot of work? What's the status of that supply chain out there?
So, which would you like me to answer first? So I'll do with this.
Your call.
I'll do with the safety culture. So safety culture for a company starts from the CEO down or from the board down. So they have to, they have to stress it and they have to push it. There has to be, hey, I'm willing to raise concerns. I'm willing to raise comments. There has to be a low threshold to enter stuff into the corrective action program. We have a very robust employee concerns program and safety conscious work environment program at TerraPower. It's actually ran by some ex-NRC people that comes in. We do pulse checks. We evaluate all the condition reports. We have screening criteria that goes on there where we'll look and do trends to see if something comes up. We have anonymous ways that they can put concerns there, and then we get that. We also tie, looking forward to construction, we're going to tie all the corrective action programs together so that we can see that there's some lessons learned where some of the corrective action programs and previous constructions didn't talk to each other, and that ended up in causing the NRC to do some enforcement actions. So we actually, with like Bechtel, we talk to their ECP people, and we'll run the corrective action program. So there's a tight link between training, safety culture, and continuous improvement in a corrective action program. With TerraPower, we actually have guiding principles that mirror the in-post safety traits. So that's inborn and bred down into our country. We will take, into our company, we will take that to the construction. Our subcontractors have to have that. So we'll go back and we'll look at that. That, like I said, we do proactive pulse checks, we do proactive interviews, and then we take lessons learned and feedback. If we see that there's an issue, we'll actually sit down and have talks with that group if we see there's some concerns or trends coming up to make sure that there's still openness in that group to raise concerns. Going to the second question, we just now started some of the vendor inspections. And, like I said, one of our goals is to ensure that our inspections are harder than what they'll get from the NRC. So we can identify issues at our vendors, they can correct them, and they can put them back into their program. And so same way when we do construction oversight, I expect our inspections to be harder. In fact, most of my construction oversight inspectors are actually ex-NRC inspectors from the 70s and the 80s that actually did a lot of the construction oversight inspections along with working. So we're finding some things that were missed. Like I said, we're very intrusive when we go back and we look at it. We've only done one. We're going to really focus on some. As with us, we have some brand new vendors that just now established some Appendix B programs. The NRC's never looked at them. So we're going to go over there. Part of it will be training, and part of it will be a very intrusive inspection, and then it'll be additional training to make sure they can bring their programs up. So I'm getting high quality components back. So if you give me about another 6 months and you ask that question, you come out and visit the site, I'll be able to give you a little bit more in depth. But we did go to an established vendor and we did identify some things, and they are going to have to correct that. And that's a vendor that's had a lot of inspections to it. So I think it's paying off. It's showing that we're having an impact and improving the quality and the safety, and that's what it's for.
Thank you. Nader, I can't let you off the hook, my friend. So you talked about a number of things Westinghouse is doing to improve the supply chain situation. So what's the capacity? I mean, how many AP1000s can we build without being supply constrained?
We can build as many as customers would like us to build. I mean, obviously, we're gearing up. We've been working very, very hard with the staff, and my compliments to Jeremy and his staff to put together some initiatives to safety enhancements that would be in a topical report where potential customers could pick and choose what they want to take out of that topical report so that we can be prepared to you can be prepared to license as many reactors as possible. We want to keep any design changes to a minimum, but we want to provide flexibility to our potential customers and streamline the licensing reviews for the staff.
Jennifer, I'm out of time, but we'll talk another time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Weaver. I get to go last, and I'm going to take a piece out of the FIFA World Cup playbook, and I've been tallying up the extra time that my colleagues on the commission have been accruing, and I'm going to add it to my own time. I like that. No flopping at the table. Look, great presentations. Thank you so much for being here, and I really appreciate the thoughtful questions from my colleagues on the commission. I want to step back, and I hope that the NRC's audience takes away that this is an incredible story of American innovation in nuclear energy with a focus on safety. It also represents a deliberate and coordinated effort with the Department of Energy and the NRC, two agencies working in their independent lanes but heading to the same destination of America safely deploying new technologies and reestablishing the United States as a leader in nuclear energy. All of your companies are part of that. I've been to several of them already, and again, through the work of the Department of Energy, investing in the industrial base around the entire nuclear life cycle, including, on the front end with fuel, as well as investments from the energy dominance financing for long lead time components for AP1000, the advanced reactor demo. This is nuclear innovation in motion in the United States of America, and we are doing it safely. So appreciate that, as well as our work with our Canadian counterparts in international cooperation. I want to just make a few comments on some points I heard today, and then I have a couple questions, but I'm going to fire them quickly. George, you made some comments about training for the NRC on the TerraPower design, as well as extending that to the Office of Nuclear Regulation, that's ONR in the UK. That's really fantastic. My message to all of you that are in the new entrant community, I think you ought to replicate that process with the NRC staff, is do the training on the designs. That will really help us learn together with these new technologies. Jennifer, you made a comment, I picked up on it, where you talked about you went into this with the first mover challenges in mind. And I've seen in my career in this industry that as far as engaging with the regulator goes, there's no first mover advantage. Everybody wants to be first, to be second. And this is maybe more for the NRC staff. That's what we have to change, right? Through the engagement in the process that we have. George, I would really love for TerraPower to be able to share your cost-benefit analysis on pre-application engagement, because going forward, we are making all these reforms at the NRC. We just cannot be living in a world where you are planning for problems in your application. That's what we have to fix. That's why continuous improvement is really so important for this agency. So the other thought that was going through my mind in listening to your experiences thus far, I think NRC, from what I'm seeing now, is being very flexible in getting the feedback in the interactions we're having, either through the DTLE process over at DOE or some pre-app activities. I think the vendors need to demonstrate that same level of flexibility as well. Give us some grace. We're learning new behaviors. Maybe we could communicate better some of the feedback we're giving you, so please, allow time for those discussions to unfold. I assure you the NRC will not be an impediment to this moment, and we will, ensure that we are focused on safety. So, safety. I want to start with my first question. Ted, I really appreciate you emphasizing the point on safety, because safety is what unifies us all here at this table today. What role do you see that the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations might be able to play with the different crowd that you mentioned that's in the new entrant community today?
Well, they're obviously an excellent organization, and they really exemplify safety like none other. I think it really depends a little bit on the role. That they have been extremely effective in the commercial industry, helping the commercial industry make sure that they're basically ahead of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in terms of so that they know in advance, the industry knows. I see that they might be able to participate by providing workshops for some of the newcomers into the industry, because this is a different type of, without being utilities, there's a little different type of industry that's coming, and it's smaller groups and folks that aren't quite, they don't have the established workforces the way the utility industry does. They might be able to help in providing workshops of some type on a volunteer basis if they were willing to do that. That would be the one area. The problem is, as much as I'd like to see them in this business, is what's the role,
Right.
how the role would fit in, and that. But if we could get them involved, I'd love to have them.
Okay. Any other presenters at the table on any views on INPO and kind of how you see their role? I know they're coming at it from kind of what they've been doing with the large light water reactors operating today, but they have training programs as well that help meet the NRC's training rule. But any perspectives you all might want to share?
Yeah, we started out as a supply with INPO. We're going to become a full member. We're in the process because we see a lot of benefit, especially with OPI peer checks where they can bring people. Just with startup, they had people that evaluated the Vogel startups. They evaluated some of the Chinese company startups. So even though our reactor is a little bit different, they can bring that expertise and give us hints on how to do here, or B, how to do more efficient, make sure we're more reliable. So I see benefits. They need to reevaluate some of the structures, but they're working with the advanced reactors and new reactor communities to do that, to actually have like an a la carte service. So I see a lot of benefit.
Rita, anything? Dan?
Yeah, I would agree with what's been said, that it needs to be reformed a bit for the small, especially for the microreactor community, and we really need to assess what the role would be. But a la carte is a perfect way to describe it. That if we can pick and choose the optionality of where we work with INPO, that would be greatly appreciated.
Great. Thank you both. Okay, Beth, to international cooperation. So I worked at both of the international organizations you referenced in your materials, and there was a vision in one project that I was involved with at the Nuclear Energy Agency for really taking the international cooperation way further than we are today. So tell me, what would it take to be able to have countries issue an approval for a design, barring site-specific environmental things or nationally specific security and emergency preparedness requirements? What would it really take to really achieve what I think is possible, but to have true multilateral licensing, so it's just one review, one license can be substantially done by multiple countries? What would that take?
Thank you for the question. It's a tough one, actually, but a good ambition. With what I've seen on our collaboration with the NRC, a key factor is to understand each other's regulatory framework and to know what the differences are and what the similarities are. I think at this point, Canada is not at the point of adopting, for example, a standard plant approved by the NRC. However, we have experienced leveraging aspects of that. So we're getting there. There is definitely progress that's happening. There are differences with our regulatory framework that we would need to understand how those impact the more broad approval, I'll call it. For instance, criteria for design basis accident is different between countries, and these are legal requirements that need to be met, and we need to assure that they are met. So that is one of the barriers left to surmount.
Can you tell me how big the barrier is or how big the gap is to close in terms of things that may be legal requirements in your framework vis-a-vis NRC's framework?
We've recently done a review where we looked at what are these key aspects that need to be demonstrated that are met for the Canadian framework, and it's not a long list. It is a handful of key aspects, like the design basis accident criteria, for instance, is one of them. I can't speak to exactly all the off the top of my head, but those would be the areas that we would focus on should we want to leverage the NRC's standard plant approval. We could categorize the different aspects of that application. So some aspects we could rely and leverage the NRC's approval. Other aspects we would need a little bit more review. And then those key ones would need to be our main focus. So we would really focus on that area from a risk-based point of view.
Thank you. My last question is to Nader. $17.5 billion long lead time components for AP 1000. What time frame should NRC be thinking about for applications coming in?
So as discussions and negotiations are continuing with potential clients, Westinghouse is continuing to work with the staff to streamline licensing for the future. While the licensing of future reactors are going to be primarily driven by our customers, I can tell you that Westinghouse is working very, very hard to make it as easy as possible for our clients and for the NRC to license future reactors. I would say that by the end of this year, first quarter of next year, the agency should see a couple of applications.
Okay.
That's dependent on Rev 20. No pressure.
Okay. But as you point out, Rev 20 includes a lot of what NRC has seen in other regulatory
Correct.
processes as well. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm out of time. Thank you for the presentations. Again, thank you all for the questions. We are going to take a 5-minute break to reset the table, and then we'll return with the NRC staff presentations. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody, and we're going to continue the commission meeting today now with the staff's presentation. You've heard a lot from the external panelists, and now we get to hear about the staff's readiness in this moment. Any fellow commissioners have any comments they want to make before the staff's presentations? Okay, turn it over to the NRC's Executive Director for Operations, Mike King.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners, for the opportunity to cram hour and a half discussion into 1 hour. With all joking aside, I wanted to begin by echoing the comments that many of you have made, that the remarkable progress we've made together as an agency. We're in one of the most consequential periods in NRC history, and our collective efforts are positioning us to meet the anticipated surge in new and advanced workload with confidence and with excellence. Next slide, please. Over the past year, we've taken bold steps to modernize our operations and regulations and aligned our agency structure with the rapidly evolving nuclear landscape. Last month, we implemented an agency-wide reorganization that streamlines decision-making, consolidates functions, and aligns the NRC structure with national goals for efficient licensing and adoption of innovative nuclear technology. Establishing the Office of Advanced Reactors is a direct investment in our mission, strengthening our ability to provide safe, secure, and predictable licensing as new technologies move toward deployment. This change empowers our workforce, strengthens technical credibility, and creates clearer development pathways. Through these changes, we're keeping safety as our North Star and our principles of good regulation front and center. Alongside these structural changes, we're launching the Leadership Excellence, Accountability, and Discipline Framework, or LEAD framework. And I briefly introduced this at the RIC earlier this year, and it's evolved since that time. The framework is designed to drive a culture of accountability and continuous improvement in a sustainable way. It embeds clear expectations, ownership of results, and continuous learning into our daily operations, ensuring that the improvements we make today endure long after everybody at the table here today is gone. The LEAD framework is not more bureaucracy. It's how high-performing nuclear organizations sustain excellence. It focuses our energy on what matters most for safety, removes friction, gives our people the clarity they need to act. It calls on us to set clear direction and high standards, develop our people, remain self-aware and self-correcting, and continuously learn and improve. Our agency-wide efforts, from the organizational realignment to the LEAD framework, are designed to support and amplify the work you'll hear about from the panel members here today. Simply put, the agency is doubling down on our commitment to sustained operational excellence, and our progress is already seeing tangible benefits and measurable results. Review schedules and resource targets are consistently being met, even as we tackle increasingly complex first-of-a-kind reviews, without being an unnecessary barrier to first movers that we discussed in the earlier panel. Now let me turn it over to the Director of Office of Advanced Reactors, Jeremy Bowen. Next slide.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. We appreciate the opportunity to highlight the recent accomplishments of the Advanced Reactor Program and to share with you our vision for continued success. Development of a navigable licensing framework and completion of timely, cost-effective reviews continues to be driven by proactive and deliberative engagement with the Advanced Reactor community. Next slide, please. The Advance Act and Executive Order 14300 were introduced to enable regulatory modernization. They provided us with direction on how to achieve our statutory requirements, along with the necessary tools to evolve our processes. The Advanced Reactor staff have embraced this direction and leaned into the principles of these mandates. First and foremost, NRC Advanced Reactor reviews have leveraged the capabilities of these new technologies, acknowledging the enhanced safety benefits and expanded features. Pre-application engagement has been particularly successful in allowing for early understanding, opportunity for feedback, and timely resolution of technical or policy issues. Christian Araguis, OAR's Deputy Director for Engineering and Science, will discuss pre-application in more detail. Environmental reviews have been a focus area for Advanced Reactor applicants, and the NRC staff have made it a priority to streamline this aspect of our work. This includes reduced documentation, expanded opportunities to credit prior activities and cooperative engagements, and benchmarking with other federal agencies and the Council for Environmental Quality. Kimyata Savoy, the NRC's Executive Champion for Environmental, will provide additional information regarding the staff's work in this area. As part of the larger federal family, we've strengthened and expanded our relationship with the Department of Energy and the Department of War to further accelerate the testing and deployment of safe advanced reactor technologies. These partnerships broaden our expertise, improve review quality, and help align expectations across the advanced reactor ecosystem. Michelle Sampson, OAR's Deputy Director for Licensing and Programs, will provide more information on these activities. Going beyond technical reviews, streamlined engagement with the Advisory Committee on Reactor Safeguards, along with changes to the contested and mandatory hearing processes, are instrumental to our ability to meet aggressive licensing timelines. Changes here allow all parties to focus on the unique, novel, and most important issues impacting a licensing decision. We're also expanding the ability of advanced reactor developers to expedite construction activities that have negligible impacts on safety. And the Advanced Reactor Construction Oversight Program is expected to provide the necessary focus to bring this aspect of regulatory engagement in line with the lower risk profiles of these technologies. Michelle will also provide some additional details on these activities. Overall, our top priority continues to be delivering high quality safety reviews on schedule and within cost estimates. The NRC staff are committed to accommodating various business models, and we are aligned with enabling safe, high-volume licensing and rapid deployment of standardized designs. Next slide, please. We recognize that planned improvements need to be supported by demonstrable results. Over the past several years, we've consistently met review schedules and resource targets while conducting increasingly complex first-of-a-kind reviews. These successes are repeatable, and they are not isolated cases. Thus far, we have completed our reviews in an average of 16 months and at a cost of $6.5 million. The two most recent reviews were for TerraPower's Natrium reactor at the Kemmerer site and GE Vernova Hitachi's BWX 300 reactor at the Tennessee Valley Authority's Clinch River site. The Kemmerer review marked numerous historical firsts, including being the first application to use a fully risk-informed, performance-based licensing approach. This approach aligns with the NRC's recently issued Part 53 licensing framework. The Clinch River review demonstrated our ability to transfer recent lessons from the non-light water reactor reviews and apply those efficiencies to our assessment of advanced LWR technologies. Established schedules and resource estimates for projects that are ongoing or that were recently initiated reflects our commitment to continuous improvement. We expect to gain further efficiencies as we implement additional learnings and leverage the benefits of the NRC's recent reorganization. Applicants can also expect to see reduced costs in the near term through the Advanced Act provisions to incentivize advanced nuclear development. The NRC is ready to enable the next generation safe nuclear power. However, clarity of the landscape and active participation by the entire advanced reactor community is critical to our success. A major strength of the program continues to be pre-application engagement, and we are seeing an increase in the number of requests for interaction. Our goal is to offer clear and consistent guidance and to help potential applicants understand when their materials are well positioned for submittal. Readiness reviews can be especially helpful in identifying any remaining gaps and refining regulatory engagement plans so that applications enable timely reviews. Next slide, please. These predictable and timely reviews result from both efficient NRC processes and applicants having a clear understanding of the regulatory expectations, the licensing pathways, and the review status. So therefore, transparency and accountability remain core pillars of the Advanced Reactor program, and we have made significant improvements to our applicant-facing resources. These include online dashboards and applicant-specific websites that provide real-time data and clarity on how our reviews are progressing. To support new entrants and to help applicants prepare more effectively, we previously created a prospective applicant guide and dedicated link to connect with us on questions or to begin engagement. The structured approach outlined in this guide is intended to strengthen opportunities for early issue identification and open communication. Recognizing the spectrum of technology readiness, variations in knowledge of the regulatory process, and an ever-changing landscape, we do have plans to enhance this guide and its use. Our vision is to create a more user-friendly, stepwise process to help companies learn about our relicensing framework, including potential overlaps with the Department of Energy and Department of War authorizations, develop initial thoughts on how they would like to proceed, and then come to us for pre-application engagements prepared with sufficiently detailed materials and targeted questions that will allow us to collectively move forward in a meaningful and logical manner. Part of the redevelopment of this guide includes the production of 3 short videos that are targeted at strengthening this understanding. One of these videos will highlight the licensing process and efficiencies, which have improved clarity, predictability, and review timelines. Another will summarize the modernized advanced reactor framework, including the variations between parts 50, 52, 53, and 57. And the third video will describe how the Department of Energy or Department of War authorization, coupled with early NRC engagement, can support future commercial licensing. We also plan to hold a series of workshops later this summer on these and various other topics. But for now, we'd like to share with you a clip of the first video. After that, I'll turn it over to Christian. If we get the next slide in the video, please.
The NRC is committed to safe, effective, and efficient licensing, and recent improvements are already making a meaningful impact. Across the agency, teams are working together to modernize how we review applications while maintaining our uncompromising focus on safety.
Licensing efficiency matters because it helps us deliver clearer expectations, more predictable schedules, and better alignment with applicants, all while maintaining our high safety standards.
The NRC continuously evaluates our processes to identify areas which provide limited or no safety benefit in an effort to reduce the administrative burden on both staff and applicants.
One of the biggest improvements has been streamlining the review process to reduce redundancy without reducing technical rigor.
Here's how recent improvements are making a meaningful impact.
The core team approach was used for the camera review, where the environmental team and the safety team work together on overlapping topics to expedite the review process.
We did a readiness assessment of TVA's draft application for the Clinch River nuclear site, and we were able to give written feedback on areas where we saw they had regulatory and technical gaps in their application, and allowed TVA to develop a more complete application and allow a timely review.
With collaboration, transparency, and innovation, we're building a licensing process that works better for everyone, while keeping safety at the center of everything we do.
All right, good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. We hope you enjoyed that short clip from a longer video that we expect to publish in full later this week. The remaining 2 videos are still under production and will be shared publicly in the coming months. Next slide, please. So pre-application engagement continues to be one of the strongest contributors to our recent successes. Proactive pre-application interactions allow the NRC and applicants to identify technical, environmental, and regulatory issues long before they become scheduled risks. In fiscal year 2025 alone, the staff delivered 26 advanced reactor pre-application products. That volume demonstrates not only the level of industry interest, but also how effective early dialogue has become in shaping higher quality applications and supporting review schedules that are both timely and predictable. At the higher end, topical report safety evaluations are incorporated by reference in licenses, providing early clarity to applicants and directly enabling the efficient licensing of these first-of-a-kind technologies. For example, the safety evaluation for the Chemer Unit 1 construction permit incorporated 16 different topical reports, enabling earlier deployment of that technology. Industry signals continue to point toward rapid, large-scale deployment of advanced reactors. That means the NRC must evolve from supporting primarily first-of-a-kind licensing to managing a high volume of applications. Early engagement is essential for this transition. It helps us understand each applicant's technology, deployment model, and timelines. It also gives us the insights we need to plan our internal resources, understand workforce needs, and make accurate budget decisions. These conversations are becoming a critical input into our long-term readiness. We've also seen the value of structured stakeholder forums, such as public meetings. These sessions bring together industry, community representatives, and technical experts to identify challenges early, exchange information, and gain alignment on regulatory priorities. Ongoing discussions on microreactor licensing, environmental reviews, and applicant-prepared documents are helping us refine our approaches in real time. Supporting tools like dashboards, public document libraries, and clear communication channels further promote early issue resolution, regulatory stability, and application readiness. Together, these efforts enable applicants to understand expectations well before submitting a license application. Next slide. Turning to recent reviews, we've continued to deliver strong results, often completing licensing reviews on or ahead of schedule and at or under budget. These accomplishments directly advance core mission delivery and enable the deployment of nuclear power in the United States, demonstrating that efficiency and safety can go hand in hand. The staff continually identify opportunities to refine workflows, shorten timelines, and remove unnecessary administrative steps without compromising technical rigor. Process improvements, such as the core team model, expanded audits, streamlined documentation, and risk-informed, data-driven decision-making are yielding measurable results. Recent changes to the Advisory Committee on Reactor Safeguards interactions, mandatory and contested hearing processes, and management reviews have further reduced waiting periods and administrative delay. These changes shift engagements early in the review and create additional meaningful opportunities for stakeholders to engage while supporting timely, high-quality outcomes. These steps maintain our same high safety standards while removing steps that did not add regulatory value. Foundational to maintaining these successes is a focus on workforce retention and attrition. Increased licensing activity requires a stable, highly skilled staff, and we continue to invest in developing talent in line with our expectation to continuously learn and grow future leaders. There has been a high amount of staff turnover in the last year. The tools and processes like the core team approach being developed and implemented in conjunction with the new reorganization are essential for maintaining continuity of review regardless of personnel changes. We are also strengthening our metrics framework. Agency-level indicators cascade down through business lines and branches, reinforcing performance and accountability. These metrics help us monitor schedule predictability, resource usage, and review quality, enabling timely adjustments as volume increase. Next slide. Finally, I'd like to highlight updates related to the Advanced Reactor Regulatory Framework. The Part 53 final rule was signed on March 25th, 2026, a major milestone for establishing a modern risk-informed structure that supports safe and secure use of emerging technologies. In parallel, development of Part 57 remains on track with the final rule scheduled for Commission consideration later this year. Both of these parts include provisions to enable the deployment of new and novel features, such as remote monitoring and operations. Together, Part 53 and 57 reflect our commitment to develop a flexible, technology-inclusive regulatory framework to provide clear long-term direction while maintaining the safety foundation that underpins our mission. We are also advancing innovative proposals to update Parts 50 and 52, including a predictable path to pursue well-defined alternatives to certain Part 50 and 52 requirements. This improves regulatory flexibility without reducing rigor, aligning with our focus on performance and accountability and our emphasis on enabling the safe use of nuclear technology. Early feedback indicates that industry sees this as a meaningful step toward enabling deployment while maintaining NRC safety standards. In alignment with the ADVANCE Act and Executive Order 14300, we are moving forward with targeted updates to the definition of construction and refining oversight during reactor build-out. These improvements allow more activities to occur prior to licensing, establishing clearer thresholds for design changes and focus inspections on risk-significant areas. This approach allows staff to concentrate their technical expertise on the areas of greatest safety significance while building experience with the technologies entering the pipeline. Early industry feedback has been positive, recognizing that this modernization enhances predictability while preserving the necessary safety controls. And with that, I will now turn it over to Michelle Sampson.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Christian touched on the programmatic and regulatory enhancements that are driving efficiency in our licensing reviews. I want to share with you some of the other activities we have ongoing that complement these regulatory changes and further support our ability to provide safe, secure, and predictable oversight as new technologies move toward deployment. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin by highlighting our work with international partners, which continues to play an essential role in strengthening advanced reactor licensing. Under the Memorandum of Cooperation with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the UK Office for Nuclear Regulation, and under our recently renewed bilateral Memorandum of Understanding with ONR, we are seeing real benefits from these long-standing relationships. The collaboration between our staff and the staff at CNSC and ONR has allowed us to engage productively on technical issues and to support design consistency across countries. Although each of our regulatory frameworks has unique requirements, we share the same fundamental objective, ensuring that core safety functions are fully addressed in each review. These engagements have been most effective when regulatory reviews are occurring on a similar timeline in each country. A good example is the GE Vernova Hitachi BWRX-300 small modular reactor. NRC and CNSC reviewed a series of technical issues in parallel and issued joint publications that clearly captured where the design meets each country's regulatory requirements in similar ways and where the approaches diverge. These joint documents have strengthened transparency and provided a solid foundation for consistent interpretation across jurisdictions. The QR code on the screen provides the publicly available link where our joint reports can be found. Collaboration becomes even more impactful when applicants and reactor designers are active participants in the multilateral effort. The six-party engagement on the BWRX-300, which includes GE Vernova Hitachi, TVA as the U.S. applicant, Ontario Power Generation as a Canadian applicant, and the NRC, CNSC, and ONR, has created an important forum for direct communication among senior leaders. This group has been instrumental in providing strategic direction, aligning on the value of joint work products, and reinforcing the importance of design consistency across national boundaries. Construction on the BWRX-300 reactor is well underway in Canada, and we anticipate issuance of the construction permit to TVA early this fall. Next slide, please. In addition to our international partnerships, we continue to strengthen coordination with federal partners here in the United States, particularly the Department of Energy and the Department of War, leveraging a whole-of-government approach to accelerate the development and safe deployment of advanced nuclear technologies. The NRC has been working closely with both departments to share insights on designs under development and to engage with technology developers early in the process. This early dialogue allows us to identify potential licensing challenges long before an application is submitted, and it helps us find opportunities to streamline reviews efficiently while preserving safety. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the NRC staff who have been detailed to the Department of Energy. Those staff members from the Office of Research, Nuclear Reactor Regulation, and OAR have been invaluable to the department, and we will benefit from their experience as they return to the agency later this year. To further support this work, the NRC issued a proposed rule that would establish a clear regulatory pathway for leveraging design information from DOE and DOW demonstration projects. When vendors follow well-defined approaches during the design and authorization process, the NRC intends to rely on this information to the fullest extent practicable, provided it remains applicable to the specific site and project. When vendors pursue novel approaches, insights gained through early engagement and through observing DOE and DOW activities will strengthen our ability to review those applications efficiently. Test facilities authorized by DOE and DOW will provide critical safety data that can be leveraged in a future commercial license application. The staff is coordinating closely with DOE, DOW, and the various developers to identify the similarities and differences between the processes and where there is overlap that can be utilized. It is important to remember that the two processes are established to provide different outcomes and do not directly align. For example, the demonstration approvals are typically for limited operations, while the NRC considers operation of the reactor for a 40-year license term. These differences may require additional information on materials, fuel and equipment qualification, component reliability, and used fuel management to be incorporated into the applicant's submittal to the NRC. In all cases, we expect to significantly utilize the information gained from the demonstration projects. The forthcoming video Jeremy mentioned and a companion infographic will provide additional insights to how these DOE and DOW activities can provide a bridge to efficient commercial licensing. Communication among NRC, DOE or DOW, and potential applicants will be essential. Initial goals, criticality tests, and early technology demonstrations will be important steps in preparing for future commercial NRC applications. We expect substantial learning from these efforts and will continue to adapt our program as new insights emerge. Next slide. Lastly, I'd like to highlight the work we have been doing to support future construction oversight activities as we prepare for an increasingly diverse and high-volume advanced reactor landscape. The Advanced Reactor Construction Oversight Program, RCOP, is one of the most significant shifts in our oversight approach. RCOP moves us away from a rigid, site-specific model and toward a life cycle approach that focuses on core safety cornerstones: reactivity, heat, and containment. This allows the NRC to scale its oversight footprint to match the risk profile of each design, supporting factory-fabricated microreactors, other advanced technologies, and the next generation of large light water reactors. We also recognize that supply chain readiness is a critical part of successful construction. We're working closely with the Office of Research to develop guidance that will support endorsement of Code Case N883, which allows certain components to be constructed before the formal establishment of an ASME Section 3 owner. This endorsement will be incorporated through future rulemaking and will help industry maintain project schedules while ensuring appropriate quality assurance. Early planning for oversight implementation has already shown measurable benefits. By prioritizing activities with the greatest safety significance, we anticipate roughly a 40% reduction in the planned direct inspection hours in some areas, with up to 65% reduction in resources expected for future large light water construction oversight. This approach minimizes administrative burden and directs staff effort toward the areas of highest technical importance and safety significance. To support this approach, inspection matrices are under development for the Natrium, AP1000, BWX300, and XE100 designs. We also anticipate applying lessons learned from the ongoing construction oversight activities that CNSC is conducting for the BWX300 at Ontario Power Generation. Just as we coordinated closely during technical reviews, we are continuing those conversations now to support our future oversight of the TVA project. This alignment strengthens the quality of our inspections and supports design consistency across borders. I will now turn over to Kenyatta Savoy, the Executive Champion for Environmental. Next slide, please.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to share an update on how we're refining and streamlining the NRC's environmental review process. Next slide. This slide highlights how we developed our streamlined review framework by relying on data-driven insights, lessons learned, and consistent use of modernization tools. Recent advanced reactor reviews and other work across the agency's business lines gave staff practical, real-time experience implementing these improvements. The slide also shows the scope of our work since 2019. 71 environmental reviews, and more than 7,400 pages. It also highlights trends in 2 representative areas: the number of days required to complete environmental assessments and environmental impact statements, and overall page counts. Both show a downward trajectory and improved consistency as our streamlined practices take hold. Several key practices, as shown on the slide, contributed to these trends: upfront schedule and resource modeling to support more predictable reviews, stronger pre-application engagement and early alignment, use of open audits with focus RAIs and RCIs, more concise, better targeted environmental documents, and streamlining comment resolution, and also increasing the use of environmental assessments when appropriate. We also strengthened our framework through the recently published categorical exclusion and new nuclear reactors generic environmental impact statement, or NRGIS final rules. The categorical exclusion rule identifies categories of actions that do not have a significant effect on the human environment, allowing staff to complete their analysis in a short document. The NRGIS reflects an intensive technology-neutral evaluation that examined a broad set of plant and site parameters to determine which environmental impacts are common across many new reactor projects and which require project-specific analysis. The final rule integrates this extensive analysis into a generic bounding framework, supporting a more predictable and efficient review process while maintaining transparency and National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, compliance. Both of these approaches allow staff to prioritize their effort on what matters the most and the projects that have the greatest likelihood for significant environmental impacts. Finally, we continue to improve internal coordination by applying lessons from the NRC's mission statement implementation plan, reinforcing licensing best practices, and using agencies' clarity versus consulting guidance. These steps help us focus early on the issues that matter the most for each project and support more predictable, higher quality outcomes. Next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Okay. This slide builds on the outcomes we just discussed by showing how our environmental review process functions as an integrated, modernized framework. The tiles shown on this slide illustrate steady decreases in schedule and resource needs across multiple projects as measured against both the historical and NRGIS schedule and resource models. Over time, we have refined our resource and schedule models to reflect real-time streamlining efficiencies. As staff use this framework under the adjusted models, reviews are completed with more predictability and with greater consistency. The framework also shows and supports continuous learning. As staff complete more advanced reactor reviews, they feed real-time insights back into the processes and models. That experience directly sharpens how we scope environmental issues, conduct audits, coordinate with other agencies, and select appropriate NEPA approaches. Each completed review provides new quantifiable evidence of how specific efficiencies translate into measurable savings. This is a major reason why our reviews are becoming more predictable and why efficiencies are now repeating across different technologies and applicant types. Staff are also piloting new review approaches such as the applicant-prepared NRC-supervised NEPA documents, which are expected to yield additional efficiencies that are being monitored and quantified in real time and refine future estimates. We also anticipate that post-Part 51 revision schedules and resource templates will reflect further reduced models. Finally, this integrated approach is aligned with recent NEPA changes under the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the ADVANCE Act, and Executive Order 14300. By building modernization into the structure of the review itself, the staff is now positioned to scale efficiently as the number of applications grow. We now have a cohesive cohesive environmental review framework, one that supports efficient, timely, high-quality reviews and continues to improve with every project we complete. Next slide. As we look ahead, this slide highlights 3 areas that will shape the future direction of environmental reviews within the Advanced Reactor business line and across the agency: regulatory updates, organizational transition, and digital tools. Each area brings challenges, and we are taking concrete actions to address them. First, we have several key regulatory updates underway, including the Part 51 proposed rulemaking, which was just published for public comment on July 7, 2026, and continued implementation of the categorical exclusion and new nuclear reactor guides final rulemakings. Once the Part 51 final rule is finalized in late 2026, these rules will provide a clearer, more predictable framework for environmental reviews. A key challenge is implementing multiple major rulemaking simultaneously while maintaining consistent interpretation and adequate staff training. To address this, we are sequencing implementation guidance, coordinating cross-office training, and establishing review support checklists to ensure consistent application across business lines. Secondly, we recently transitioned from the East Environmental Center of Expertise to the business line owner model. This structure strengthens collaboration between safety and environmental staff and provides clearer accountability for end-to-end review outcomes. The challenge is that the workloads are shifting unevenly. In response, we are implementing structured change management activities, expanding targeted training, standing up cross-office support teams to balance workload, and piloting new workforce planning and surge support models to ensure no office carries the transition burden alone. As the executive champion for the environmental program during the transition, my focus is on actively identifying gaps early, coordinating resources across business lines, and ensuring consistency and quality as responsibilities are redistributed. Finally, we are expanding our digital tools. Enhancements such as the NRC's NEPA dashboard, federal permit-related AI tools such as Permit AI, and the environmental digital portal will automate routine tasks, improve review readiness, and increase transparency. The challenge is integrating the tools into established processes while maintaining data quality and minimizing disruption to ongoing reviews. To ensure success, we are redefining data governance protocols, conducting user-focused pilot testing before full deployment, and providing practical training sessions to ensure staff can adopt and trust the tools from day one. I will now turn back over to Mike King.
Thanks, Kenyatta. And before we open up to questions, I just wanted to thank the panelists for all their preparations for the meeting today, and express a great deal of appreciation to the dedicated and talented staff across the agency who have just been putting their heart and soul into the reforms we've been making as an agency to ensure we are prepared for the flood of applications that we're going to do, and to ensure that we do so safely. Subject to that, look forward to your questions.
Okay, Commissioner Wright.
Thank you. And Mike, I'm just going to piggyback right on top of what you just said. It's, one to first welcome to you and your entire team, and thank you for your leadership for the staff, and thank as well the staff for everything they're doing every day. Because it's been a wild ride here in the last year or so, but it seems to, people seem to be doing okay, and y'all seem to look like you're getting a little sleep, right? So thank you for what you do. The Advanced Reactor team has stepped up big time here in ways to meet this moment, and I really like the fact that you've got that on the pin. To think about Kimmerer, Hermes, the NuScale SDA, Part 53 final rule, as just a few of the big things that are coming through. These are major, right? The number of major things that are coming through this agency are incredible. And again, thank you, and let us know what we can do to help you keep it up. Jeremy, I have been a fan of yours publicly for at least 2 years now. Your slides address culture And that's a good thing because you have led a culture change here at the agency even before the Advance Act was passed and adopted. I appreciate how you personally cultivated culture yourself to foster safe, efficient regulation of advanced reactors. Your office is constantly breaking new ground as you review and innovate designs and review these innovative designs, and you're employing innovative ways to get things done. And the industry knows this. The vendors, the people who were before you, they recognize this and they appreciate it. And I can tell you as one commissioner, and I'm sure I speak for all five, it's noticed and very appreciated, and you should feel really, really good about what you've done to help move this agency forward. As that culture change evolves, and I'm assuming it's still evolving, as you gain experience, can you maybe share a little bit about how you're moving forward, building on the success that you've had the last couple of years?
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate the comments, and I do have to credit it. It's a team effort, and it's a lot of work. But working with people that you enjoy interacting with, and knowing that everybody's got your back, that definitely helps. So I think that's been the biggest thing that we've seen coming out of the reorganization is. There's been individual projects and groups of activities that have been going on, and everybody felt cohesion in those individual projects. But once we formed the office, it definitely, I felt a step change in everybody's enthusiasm. We can see it in our all hands meetings. I can see it in the hallways and the interactions that I have with folks. There's a lot of support that everybody has for each other. I think that's the primary thing is like we have a team that's very solution oriented, very enthusiastic about the work they do, but they know that they've got support. And it's not just the folks sitting at this table, it's the first line supervisors, it's the person sitting next to them. And so I think that's the biggest thing I'm seeing is that step change in like the level of enthusiasm. And so it's exciting to be part of.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Christian, I'm going to come to you. I appreciated your comments on the whole pre-application engagement process. I mean, I get it all the time from my interactions with stakeholders out there. They've got big plans, they've got big ideas, they want to do things new and novel, but they want to stay within that safety envelope. And our regulatory reforms are making room for novel approaches. And on the other hand, your folks are tasked, right, with executing a thorough, efficient review. So, I mean, personally, I see pre-application, that whole process it's essential as we move forward for both sides, for us and for the industry. And I'm glad that you highlighted it this morning. Do you feel that stakeholders are getting the message on pre-application engagement, and I'm going to build on that. How are our technical staff adjusting to this new paradigm, right? And are there ways that we can still improve?
So thank you, Commissioner, for the question. And it's interesting. I caught George during the break, and I said, you kind of stole my thunder. You're the poster child for, the pitch on the value of pre-application. And so I'll tell you, I've been in the role now for 5 weeks. Lesson for me, don't take vacation when you start a new job. But in the 3 weeks effectively that I've been working, we've had probably about a dozen drop-ins with companies, some that have regulatory engagement plans in-house, some that don't. But the common thread in those discussions is they recognize the value, they want to engage with us. And I think it's been incumbent upon us during those discussions to really lean forward and say, hey, we really want to work with you. We want to enable your plans. Come talk to us. Let us know what your business plans are. We'll help direct you on what the right licensing pathway is. And then that'll help drive sort of where those engagements are. And so I think there's tremendous value in pre-application. I think, to the point the chairman made, we want to be careful about not driving too much work early on, right? But I think what I'm envisioning is you kind of get stability in what you want to do in pre-application space for first of a kind. And then you would expect some of that to really table off or trail off as you start getting an nth of a kind, right? And I think what will always be important, particularly in pre-application, is some of what you heard in the previous panel, where getting acclimated to those designs early, right? And particularly as everybody's learning, you got 2 new frameworks in place. I think everyone's kind of learning on both sides of the table of how this is going to work. And so I think having those interactions early will help, de-risk when an application comes in.
So I want to go back and continue on this pre-application part. We've got how many, 25 people in front of us right now in pre-application?
Roughly.
But there's a whole bunch more that are still out there, right? What do we got to do to, and I've had 2 I know of this year, Mike, I believe, I've had 2 people contact me about, hey, we're thinking about something down the road where, we want to engage the NRC and we're planning on doing X by a certain, I said, have you engaged yet? And they said no. And I was like, well, why are you not getting the memo? You need to get in touch with our people. How do we get that message out there to those people that we know are out there, but they just haven't come yet? Because they're going to get behind the 8 ball if they're not careful.
I can start. So I think part of the answer is I think what Jeremy talked about early on in his presentation, right? Building out the framework that we can point applicants to, which is our prospectus, website, where we'll have lots of material there. But I think to get to the root of how do you drive those individuals? And I think a lot of what we can do is, in our public meetings, we talked about we're going to have workshops over the next several months. I think as we talk about issues, as we talk about the various frameworks, I think that's our opportunity to really underscore the value and coming to talk with us. So it's not just a company by company message that you're getting, but you're getting that broader feedback out in these settings where you're getting a lot of attendance and a lot of interest.
Yeah.
That'll. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, maybe Christian said the key thing I want to touch on is those are the tools to help communicate the information, but the driving the customer to the tool, I think that's what you're getting at, sir, is everybody we talk to, I think there's some of the historical reservation of speaking to the regulator too soon. And so we encourage folks that if they have a good experience with us and talk about positive, we're like, hey, tell a friend. Make sure you get it out there and tell somebody what the value you got out of early engagement. And we've been partnering with the Office of Public Affairs as well to try and put out more of we want to be helpful. We want to provide assistance early on to kind of help move forward. We have a job to do as an independent regulator, but that doesn't mean we can't still be helpful.
Mike?
If I could add on a little bit. In addition to developing the external communications to help inform, what is our pre-application process about? The discussion that was had earlier about under what circumstances does it provide value, and at what stage of development as a potential applicant. So us being really clear with people about, hey, having that initial touch point to at least talk to us about what you're thinking makes a lot of sense. And then we can help you determine, okay, at what next phase does it make sense to really have substantive engagement? Because we do have a lot of work before us, and we have to be thoughtful about applying our resources where it matters. And so we can help inform applicants about when's the right stage to come to us so you can really get the most out of it.
Thank you. We just did that just the last 5 minutes here, so thank you for making it public. Thank you.
Commissioner Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all the presenters today. I appreciate it. It's very helpful to have both industry and staff panels come and engage the commission at the same time. My questions aren't necessarily going to have a theme. They're going to be a little bit random, but I do plan to get them done without using any added time, Mr. Chair. For Mike and Jeremy, please, jump ball or direct these questions where they deserve to be answered best. Either for applications we're considering or applications we expect, are there applicants? What does the world look like of applicants who hope to use HALEU enriched beyond 10%?
That's a good question, Commissioner. I don't know if I have a number off the top of my head right now.
Multiple? More than we've ever seen before?
Yeah, I'd say yes, more than we've interacted with to date, but I don't have a number because, quite honestly, that's not been an area that's I would say has been of concern to us at this stage. But we keep
Is there a stage at which it becomes a concern? Because it is something that needs to be noted and managed without getting too deep into this topic. But I mean, what's the plan? How I mean, are we prepared to manage that dynamic from a safety and security perspective?
Jeremy,
Yeah,
so
Chelsea.
one of the real benefits of the Office of Advanced Reactors is we have moved the security staff that are focused on advanced reactors into the office, and we are having those integrated discussions today. I mean, we have one particular applicant that has proposed to use HEU. Well, that's going to be a game changer for how we've licensed reactors in the past. We are having those internal discussions today. And it's an entity that hasn't even had their first pre-application engagement with us, but we've started having those discussions today because we know that there is planning and work that we're going to have to do to be ready for it. And I think we've been integrated very closely with our NMSS counterparts in the fuel cycle area to really understand and watch them to see, you know, what are the leading indicators that fuel cycle, that slightly enriched enrichment is going to be coming to us so that we can have the engagements at the right time.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a good, bad, or otherwise. It's just something that is different than we've done before and carries more safety and security risks, and we need to be cognizant of it and manage it appropriately. For whomever or multiple folks, for the benefit of those listening to this meeting today, and myself, quite frankly, can you try and give some color or examples of gaps that have been identified or we expect to identify that the NRC will have to focus on that aren't incorporated in a DOE review or another federal agency's review?
Sure, I can start. Appreciate that, and that's actually, one area where we're starting to shift a lot more focus on is that, there was you heard from Assistant Secretary Garrish about the July 4th timelines and trying to get the push for meeting those deadlines. But now we're starting to coordinate a little bit more on exactly what does that mean to go from the test to commercial operation and deployment, and understanding. I think the first question is, what is your licensing pathway? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your licensing pathway? And then based on that, what information can you take from the DOE authorization to move into NRC licensing? Obviously, depending on the licensing pathway, you might need certain information, might not. And also, what are you actually testing? You heard from the first panel, there's a variety of activities that are going on, some just simple criticality tests to prove their neutronics modeling and information to that effect. Others are testing viability of systems and structures and components to make sure that they actually perform the functions as they envision. Others are going full-scale operation, and then they want to convert that same facility to an NRC commercial license. So we're trying to understand the full spectrum and figure out each one, how do we transition from that specific activity to commercial licensing? So there are some things where there is a clear, the DOE's process, they're looking at a test. You heard from the Assistant Secretary, it is a test in most cases of what they're going commercial operation. We're trying to look and understand, how long is the DOE looking at approving this, or are they finding validation of information for X number of days or months where we're going to have to issue a commercial license for 40 years. So trying to understand what that time frame is, how much information they have on material qualification for the duration of the operation. There is a difference in emergency planning. In the cases where the facilities are operating on the national labs, they're using a lot of the infrastructure on the labs for emergency response, fire protection, that sort of information, whereas a commercial deployment, they need to provide that on their own. So it really, really depends on the specific activity. And, so we have some kind of generic guidance out there, but we're starting to work with several of the developers to, okay, what specifically does that look like for your situation? And each one of those is going to allow us to provide more details for the next round that goes through, and certainly the
So as
projects.
these things mature, as the process matures, we'll get more
Yes.
color on this stuff. And I appreciate you just keeping us informed of that, so we have a good sense of what those gaps that are being identified. Somewhat of a non sequitur here, but I'm looking at the chart, Jeremy, that you used on meeting demand, safe and timely licensing, and I noticed a 15-month schedule for an early site permit. What is the value of an early site permit, given the time it takes?
Joe, you want to talk?
Yeah. So the value of an early site permit is for an entity that knows which site they want to use, but they have not yet selected a technology. If you know everything you want to do, come in for your COLA or your construction permit. But if you know which site you want to use and you haven't yet selected your technology, you can do your site characterization and get NRC approval of that site that can provide finality and be referenced in that other application, getting a big piece of what really is a large part of the review out of the way while you're making those other decisions.
But if an ESP takes 15 months, is it worth that, given that we're trying to do full soup to nuts reviews in not much more time than that?
So we have our first sort of new ESP in quite a while in-house today, which is the Blues Creek review. And, we're making really positive progress through that review. And so I'll be interested to see at the end of it if it really takes us the full 15 months. It might move faster than that. And we're learning lessons as we're completing the review. We also have some regulatory changes in place that will help us accelerate because, of course, the environmental portion is a big piece of that schedule. And as Kimiana mentioned, we have a lot of enhancements in that area as well. So,
yeah. And I think, I also understand that, applicants or prospective applicants may have their own rationales, non-safety or NRC related, why they may want to pursue an ESP. Mike, my last question to you, because as I was listening and reading, I connected some dots, and I'm curious to know how this matches up. But everybody's presentation here at the table today mentioned lessons learned in some capacity, and yet the commission is currently considering a recommendation from the EDO to get rid of the lessons learned program. How do you square these things for me?
Yeah, and what the recommendations of the commission is one of several different types of lessons learned program. So we have, in particularly with launching of the LEAD framework, there are a number of different processes that we use to make sure we're self-aware and self-correcting. And so we're constantly learning and developing lessons. One of them is a rapid lessons learned process, which we've adopted from and our benchmarking against IMPO, and that's embedded in our framework. We're about to roll that out in earnest over the coming months. We've got a lot of other lessons learned programs, our internal control programs, which are government-wide, as you're aware. So there are several other things we do in the context of lessons learned, and so our recommendation to the commission is that additional program is not necessary. We're going to do the lessons learned as part of our process. That was just an additional layer that's unnecessary from the staff's perspective.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Cole. Commissioner Marzano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, staff, for your presentations and all the work that you put into preparing for these meetings. I'm always grateful for these efforts to make sure that we make the most of them, which has become even more important as of late as we've scaled back our public engagement. And I hope that we can reverse this trend once we make it past these 14,300 rulemaking deadlines. So that's why I am very grateful to have the opportunity for staff to show the significant progress that you've made in preparing for this rapidly expanding advanced reactor landscape. The staff should be incredibly proud of the hard work that has brought us to our current readiness posture. But I think we've seen today it is also a reminder of just how much activity we expect in the coming years. In light of these projections, I want to emphasize that we have a limited window to scrutinize the sustainability of our current pace of reviews before our workload reaches levels we have not seen in a generation. That is why I appreciate the discussion of how early engagement has helped prospective applicants, and the communication of ongoing reforms will help manage future workload. However, we certainly have more work to do to provide the transparency and predictability that our principles of good regulation compel us to. And so in an effort to continue this showcasing, I was hoping we can throw slide 12 up again on the screen real quick. And for those of you watching, take out your phones, take a picture of this slide, because I think it's a really, really crucial tool and visualization to understand what we've been doing and how our licensing processes work for whatever need an applicant may come. And I see it's not up there yet. Hopefully we can get it up there. But I want to ask a question on this slide and go to you, Christian. So in the vote for Part 53, I called on a tool like this because I think I've heard from a lot of applicants that, especially as we're rolling out these new licensing process, how do I use these? There's lots of options. What is the best for my particular case? And so we have this really great slide. I really love this slide. So can you talk a little bit more about how we communicate why or for what purposes these licensing process exists, depending on your stage of design maturity, et cetera, and just would open up the panel to comment on this, and I'll have some follow-up questions as well.
Yep, so thanks for the question, and I got to give proper kudos to the chairman for sort of initiating that visual first and getting us to refine it in a way that it's something we could use publicly. Again, thanks for the question. I think, the way we're envisioning is that there's interplay among all of the various frameworks. We wanted to have something separate and distinct for where you are relative to your design maturity. So take 57, for example. We wanted to have something that was carved out for microreactors and low consequence facilities, but for those facilities that are ready with complete design details today. And that's why we structured it where you are required to submit a joint construction permit and operating license application. The thought being you have all of that information that we can get through a very quick review, issue the construction permit, allow for quick construction timelines because we're anticipating simple designs to be coming into the rule, and then position us to quickly issue the operating license, and all of that to occur relatively 12 months timeline, potentially sooner as we start getting into nth of a kind. Some of the feedback we're seeing in the public comments is, well, we really don't like the joint CPOL. We really want the more 50 framework, which is come in with a construction permit and then separately an operating license. And I think for us, the way we're thinking it is, hey, that exists today. If you can be a micro and you can go under Part 50, get your first of a kind. If you're not ready with the complete details, come in for a construction permit. And once you have, we issue the operating license, you get some runtime. You want to start going through fleet-wide deployment, you can come in under Part 57. And we thought about that in the rule. We actually have enabling language on issue finality that talks about, the fact that the NRC is not going to relook at generic design, parts of those various submittals. We're only going to look at effectively the site because expect that to change. So in my mind, you look at it and say it's really incumbent upon what the applicant wants. Do they want a more risk-informed approach for identifying their licensing basis events? Then you're coming in under Part 53, right? 52, you're kind of looking at more, it's standardized. It does talk about fleet-wide deployment. You're thinking that more for large light water reactors. So I think there's an identity for each of the rules. And I think, some of the communications we've had, particularly with those companies that are interested in Part 57 is, hey, if you're not ready for 57, there are a number of different pathways that are going to give you streamlined processes under predictable timelines. And I would argue, we've already gotten a number of runtime with 50, right? So to me, that's already sort of de-risked and for a number of entities to think about coming in first of a kind there and then pursuing, 57 later.
And when I look at some of the work that we've done with the power to the grid rule and everything else, I think that we're getting even closer to Part 50 as being this true kind of first of a kind. If you don't have the design maturity, is a really good option, so I appreciate that. I don't want to necessarily get into this too much, but I think we've heard a lot about interoperability, maybe something that we have to address in the future and think about if you're not already. So turning now, so we have the tool. One of the concepts that I have thought would be a good idea here, and as Commissioner Wright has said already, we need a front door to the agency. Some type of office or some type of function within the NRC that can really be the receiving office for these folks that haven't come to engage with us, because I still think it is quite opaque when you're going to our website and trying to navigate to find how do I even begin. So I'll just leave that right there. I know we talked a lot about this already, but I want to turn to pre-application engagement. We mentioned some of the maybe reluctance for folks to dive in. One of the things we mentioned, it's concerns about engaging with the regulator too early. I think that cost is another part of that, because once they start engaging with us, we start charging them time. And that's what the Advance Act really tried to address. And so, there are some requirements to qualify for the reduced hourly rate. We are also capable of recovering off the fee-based money for those types of reviews. So I want to get your sense of how the Advance Act portion of this is helping controlling costs. And really what I want to get at is, how do we make sure that the pre-application process is a all-encompassing environment to have the candid, fulsome discussions between applicants and reviewers that we need to really deliver on those savings come time for the license application.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I'll start, and if others want to jump in. Yes, the Advance Act has been tremendously helpful in encouraging, with the reduced fees, encouraging applicants to
Could you really quick just, what do you need in order to qualify for that reduced rate?
Yeah, and help me with the specific terminology, Michelle, because I don't remember it. But
Sure. So you must be an advanced reactor in accordance with the NEMA definition, and a design that has enhancements over reactors that were in construction at the time that NEMA was passed. And so we have found, working with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer and our Office of General Counsel, that we have very broadly been able to include the majority of Gen 3 Plus designs, and of course all of the Gen 4 designs, into the reduced fee category.
Thank you.
I was going to offer up, I think probably the single biggest thing that's changed in our ability to really realize benefits of pre-application is a change to our culture and a mindset, enabling mindset. We issued some guidance to the staff, delivering results through effective communications with my stakeholder interactions. That's yielding benefits across the board, not just in pre-application engagements, and the staff's true willingness to engage fully and substantively to get the most out of those discussions, but in inspections, oversights across the board. So in addition to the fee benefits, I think there's other benefits that the Advance Act provided.
Great. So I think that this is all very good to hear. I want to make sure that the folks who are listening understand what the tools available that are available for them. Real quick, I just want to touch on our DOE collaboration. Michelle, can you talk a little bit about, and then Jeremy and Christian, please weigh in, the difference between NRC observation and having details, folks that are involved in the review. I think that we have to balance resources, we have to optimize resources for the work that we're going to have, and then looking ahead to what DOE is doing. So can you talk about how you're thinking about balancing those resources, optimizing, including having some of our folks maybe continue that kind of more detailed look?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. Yes, Commissioner, we've seen tremendous benefit of the detailees, like Michelle mentioned. Lots of conversations with that team. It is trying to balance our resources and make sure that we're focusing where we have those resources assigned and budgeted. The difference between the detailees is that they are assigned as DOE employees, essentially. So we are not inserting ourselves, different agency, different purpose, we have our independent function, so we are not inserting ourselves into their decision-making process. The observation, we have had pretty much all of the vendors or all the developers ask us in pre-application space to also observe the activities that are going on. So from that standpoint, we're doing our own parallel independent observation, seeing what the interactions that are going on. So we've been having interactions with the applicants. We've also been interacting with DOE. We have routine interactions with our DOE colleagues, and if we have a question or concern, we're providing both of them that feedback. We've actually been recently having conversations with the Department of Energy about how we need to start having three-way communication, three-party communications, to make sure that we're all, rather than trying, one conversation here, one this way, just all at the same time, just making sure that we, again, recognize where the lines are. So.
Well, to the point about collaborating to get all of this done, I encourage that to continue to happen. Thank you very much, and thank you for the extra time, Chairman.
Commissioner Weaver.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Well, thank you, panelists. And, I want to endorse the comments you made, Mike, earlier about the staff's efforts. It's my sincere desire that we're accomplishing some of these things by working smarter, not just working harder, because I think that will get to the sustainability of some of the things you're trying to do. So I guess I'll start with Jeremy. In this question about level of detail. So during the first Renaissance, right, folks were doing a COL and a design cert at the same time, and staff is curious. It was a lot of, well, how much information do we really need to license something was a big question, because in some cases it didn't exist yet. And folks felt, well, it wasn't really not even needed, but we were asking for it. Now we're looking at potentially having complete design information because the thing's been operated at full power for some period of time. And so I'm interested in your perspective on one, how do we stop the staff from asking for everything because potentially everything is available? And how do you balance what's the right level of information needed to make our regulatory decisions?
I appreciate that question, Commissioner, and I just want to make sure I understand. Are you asking more broadly or specifically about, you mentioned operating for a long time, are you asking about the AP1000 design?
No, I'm talking about folks who haven't come in yet,
okay,
who may have, they've been operating some of the DOE facilities potentially down the ones that DOE is facilitating down the road.
Yeah, so the audit process has been, it's been a game changer. I think we've always had an audit process, but I think it has evolved over the last decade, significantly over the last decade at the NRC. We are leveraging that to the point now where we actually, I say we have true conversations. We're not sitting there asking a question, waiting for a response, and then sitting there with a blank look on our face, and they have the applicant, the licensee on the other side of the table has no idea what we're thinking. The staff identifies questions, areas where there might be interest or lack of understanding, and we provide that information so that they facilitate the conversation and have the dialogue. That dialogue back and forth enables us to figure out, okay, what do we actually need? And I think that was probably one of the most beneficial things that we identified in the TerraPower review, is that there were a lot of conversations and interactions where we just simply, it was a new design to us. And once we were educated and had the knowledge, it was like, okay, we don't need information on this. We don't need material on the docket, or this one little piece, can you add this sentence for clarification for us? Those conversations allowed us to get to that spot, as opposed to, like I said, here's a question, we wait 30 days for a response, and then we don't even remember why we asked the question. So the audit process, I'd say, has been the defining piece that has helped us move forward with that.
Thank you. If you could call up slide 18. I'm curious, and this had to do with, Kenyatta, your discussion about improvements in environmental reviews. So just if we take that graph on the left and just looking at the environmental assessment, went down from 1,000 days to 200 days, 80% drop. That's pretty dramatic. And of course, that obviously started before there was an Advance Act, before there were executive orders, et cetera. And on that slide, you see some things on the bottom there that I think the staff is crediting that allowed those types of improvements. I would say there's another one that maybe isn't listed on that slide, and that's a desire to improve. For a long time, I think staff, in some cases, was very comfortable with status quo. And so to move off of that and to desire to improve is maybe the fundamental change. And as I think about what I hope to achieve in my time on the commission is to institutionalize that desire to change and to continue to get better. So Mike, your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the tremendous progress we've made as an agency over the past year and a half, 2 years. What's most important now going forward, besides delivering results and following through on the rulemaking, sure we do a thoughtful review of all the comments we're getting, is making all these changes and efforts and culture focus sustainable for the long term. And that's why the LEAD framework is so critically important. In fact, yesterday, Sabrina Atack, Caroline Carasoni, and I met with the latest cohort of the Nuclear Regulator Apprenticeship Network, which is our entry-level program for we had 29 new faces at the table. And key part of that discussion is you need to understand the LEAD framework. You need to understand what risk-informed, technology-neutral. You need to understand that we have to be self-aware, self-correcting in how we do business in the long term. So all of that, it takes leadership at all levels across the agency, and we got to be committed to ensure that we ingrain that into our day-to-day business. And so that's a very important aspect going forward.
Thank you. Christian, I'm not going to let you off the hook. 3 weeks, 5 weeks, yeah, whatever. So you spoke about lessons learned and process improvements that are helping, reduce the level of effort and the time to get licenses or construction permits approved. And then, of course, there's new rules that hopefully will be final, some this year, maybe some early next year. So if I think about where we are, and I think, are there more process is there more benefit in terms of process improvements? And if I factor in then new rules, what should I expect to see in terms of where we are today in terms of level of effort for a review versus the future? Let's say, a year from now when the rules are all finalized.
Yeah. So I'll start and then I'll have others sort of chime in. I think, just kind of hitting on your process improvements focus. I think as I'm learning, I think we have the right processes in place. I think what's going to be key for us is being able to scale to the new office. You have under the DANU and under Jeremy's leadership within DANU, they established the core team model, and that's a fundamentally different approach that we've taken to doing reviews for advanced reactor designs, particularly where you are establishing not only the project manager or project lead, but you're having a technical lead that's responsible for the entire application and pulling in the subject matter experts as needed. So it's not 20 different SMEs going off doing 20 different reviews, without the bigger picture in mind. So I think for us, what I want to see is successfully scaling that approach in a way that we can do and continue to be successful in the reviews that we execute. As far as the timelines, the 15, 16 months, it's going to vary by licensing pathway. I think we have a vision for 57 for doing it about as fast as you can possibly do. I think Jeremy would probably kick me under the table saying, I probably can do that, equally as fast under some of the other frameworks. So I think
that down.
Yeah. So I think for us, it's doubling down on the process that we have to achieve success, and then looking at where we need to put out, additional, I'd say, guidance or instructions to the staff, particularly as we're, trying new frameworks and making sure that they're set up for success. With that, I'll let others add in.
If I could just give a couple thoughts and examples. I think we've been looking the last few years at the big chunks of time, the big chunks of effort, and finding ways to get that back, if you will. So I'd look at TerraPower review. We did that review 9 months shorter than we initially planned. And the initial schedule we thought was really aggressive. But the 9 months was really because we were able to look at engagement with the ACRS differently, interactions with our partners in the Office of the General Counsel, the management review. It was like we reframed how we thought about stuff, and it resulted in a huge chunk of time and resources savings. Same thing with, I think, with the will happen with the contested hearing and the mandatory hearing process. Like, that's going to result in a large chunk of time that we're able to get back. I think eventually, to your question, Commissioner, we get to that point. I'm looking for when we get past this chunk of time comes off the schedule, and why didn't we think of that before? Now it's, all right, we've thought of a different way to ask this question, and we review something a little quicker, and we're looking at weeks, not months of time coming off the schedule. I'm optimistic we're getting close to that point, but I think that's when I feel like we'll have gotten a better feel for what can we give as a better estimate up front.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Weaver. Hey, thank you all for what you're doing, and thank you to your teammates in the Office of Advanced Reactors, as well as the cross-functional work that you have going on with other offices at the agency. At a personal level, I want to say how proud I am of you all and what you've accomplished. I've worked with all of you at some point along the time in your careers and my careers, and several of you very, very closely when we were fledgling regulators way back when. And I'm so proud to see you sitting in the roles that you occupy at the agency today in this really comprehensive, consequential moment in our agency's history. And thank you for the work that you're doing. I also want to say I love working with my fellow colleagues on the commission. I think we've established some new norms in how we're delivering in this moment in terms of not having any undue delays in our decision-making and not compromising rigor and collegiality in our reviews, and I think that really is important. When I think of the story of the NRC in this moment, I see it less of a story of new technologies and new frameworks, and I see it more as a story about the institution. It's come up in several of the lines of question already, and we can develop all the best frameworks possible and all these new rules and new licensing approaches, but if we cannot deliver safety decisions with efficiency and disciplined execution, it doesn't matter anymore. So it's my belief that the lead framework, Mike, that you referenced, and thank you for really leaning into that with your deputy executive directors and developing it. I think this is probably the single most important thing that we can do here as an agency in promoting how we do business going forward. Again, we have to be able to execute to these frameworks that we're developing, and I really appreciate what you've done so far to affect the culture change. And when I think about this culture change, I think about being a nuclear geek. Leadership K-effective has to be greater than or equal to 1. Every leader in this organization has to develop at least one other leader to be an effective example in implementing the lead model. So let me ask a few targeted questions here, and these are in no particular order. Anybody can answer here. So DOE, DOW coordination, right? It's very clear for those that aren't aware that the pathway to commercialization is through the DOE pilots, through some demonstration at the Department of War, and then to NRC commercial licensing. What is the biggest challenge right now to expedite that pathway?
I'll start and let others jump in. I think we're learning some really important lessons early on with some of these early movers. And I think the recent proposed rulemaking on how we'll do those transition and the proposed initial guidance, there's a real opportunity near term and a need for us to clarify and provide more detail and predictability on how the handoff would occur, what will make it successful. Been some great questions on exactly what areas have you identified of where there's differences. We're learning those lessons now. We need to provide more predictability into what that process will look like. So we just had discussions a couple days ago about coordinating with DOE, DOW on the next revision to that draft guidance to provide clarity on what is the purpose of the DOE or DOW authorization? How is that different than the purpose and underlying assumptions with commercial license that you get from the NRC? So people understand there are some differences and what's grounded in those differences to help them better inform anticipate what information they're going to need. And internally, what can we do based on our lessons so far to better coordinate? Should we have these three-party meetings, so that all the parties are involved to have those discussions? I love the idea that Dr. Rita Barnwell proposed of, hey, how can we leverage even the exact same paperwork that comes in and just take the pieces needed for DOE and the piece so that we minimize the administrative burden of different formats and different packages of paperwork. Those sorts of discussions we're talking about now.
Yeah, I agree with Mike, and I just want to maybe acknowledge the thirst for more clarity from the community, all the developers going through it and everybody that's interested in potentially pursuing this through Launchpad. We have that same desire. I guess I just want to make sure that that's clear to everybody. We have that desire to provide that clarity. As Mike said, it's we're learning more, and I think the biggest challenge to your question, Chairman, is we're trying to make sure we provide that clarity for the spectrum that's out there right now. And so I really appreciate the developers and the companies that have stepped up to help us with, okay, this specific example in this category or this specific example in this category, that'll allow us to get to that level of additional detail. And again, we share that desire to get there too.
Great. I see this as a top priority, especially for the micro reactors that are moving through these developmental pathways. In a similar vein, I'm observing what's going on because that's what I do. All right, I wouldn't be doing my job if I'm not watching the work of the staff. And I've noticed that there have been some technical discussions happening around topics such as seismic design classification, natural phenomenon hazard considerations, as just to name a few. Also, the other one that I've picked up recently is how to apply the maximum hypothetical accident / maximum credible accident. There's no question here, but just a suggestion, you have to keep a ledger of some of these issues that are coming up now and make sure that you have a clarity, is what you said, Jeremy. Make sure we have clarity for our applicants so they understand what the expectations are so that we're not going through over and over again Groundhog Day like with the same issues. And I know you're working on it. I know you've got that, but I just really want to stress the importance because these first movers, again, going back to the comment that Ms. Wheeler made, we cannot create that impression anymore going forward, right? You get the lead model in place, fast forward 20 years later, you got new people sitting at the table here. I'd love the story to be, hey, we know how to work with the regulator. We're not planning for there to be huge difficulties if we're a first mover. Hey, tell me about, oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, and this is where the rapid lessons learned that we're doing for LEAD framework and all the other lessons learned programs that we have is so critically important. We're taking these lessons and we're not losing opportunities to bake those into informing how we're going to implement these new changes that we're making.
Yes, and I'm aligned with Commissioner Kroll. I think it's an important thing we have to do, and I think the Commission can talk through and how it formulates its direction to the staff, how much detail we want to dictate in how you go about doing it. So that's currently underway here. Hey, tell me a little bit about prioritization. I know we've got well over 20 that you're engaging with here, and I read an article this morning that said, should there be a fifth executive order issued? And the theme of this opinion, it was just an opinion piece about down selecting, right? How do you really focus on what's most important? So can you give the Commission and our audience here how you're making those decisions on where you're spending your limited time?
Sure, I appreciate that question, Chairman, and it is accurate. It is a challenge for us to kind of make sure that we're prioritizing resources and we're appropriately resourced for everything that we're doing. We do have very detailed kind of budget models, and we've informed them from data for previous reviews. Helps us understand exactly how we're going forward, and then that also informs how are we able to take on new work and prioritize new work, and then. I hate to continue to beat the drum on pre-application engagement, but it's a large umbrella. I use that term kind of loosely, but the more an applicant talks to us, the more we understand where they are, their business model, their timelines, that allows us to be in a position best to support them. It might be that, somebody's coming in and they're really enthusiastic, but their timeline for engagement is several years out. Okay, well, we can work with them, but we can shift some prioritization elsewhere. Consider other factors in our determination when we provide.
Yeah, so thank you, Jeremy. And I've seen the dashboards that you had referenced in your presentation, and I know you're working across offices, but I just want to say it here in a public setting, make sure that the other program offices, NMSS, NRR, are benefiting from a lot of the work that's happening here and how they prioritize. I know we have a very discrete issue in fuel cycle that the Commission has been working on in terms of how they prioritize their work and ask for budgeted resources there. Last question, I'm going to drill down to N883. Okay. What's the safety concern with that? I'm familiar with the issue about the owner, but what is the safety concern?
So the staff has no safety concern with components being constructed in advance of an owner, as long as there are appropriate controls in place to ensure that the quality of that component is equivalent to the quality that would have been in place if an owner was involved, and also the assurance that that component meets the owner's design needs. Okay. And so we see N883 as a bridge to provide the framework to ensure that, particularly, of course, it's associated with ASME code components, that those code requirements are in place. We're going to provide guidance for the ultimate licensee owner to help them to be able to visualize what that quality record looks like so that everyone is on an equal footing and knows what's expected for those components.
Okay. Now, I know it's been going on a little while, so I could ask the question, why is it taking so long? But I'm not going to ask it. I'm going to ask it differently. When's it going to be resolved?
So we have our staff guidance ready to go. Of course, ASME is our partner, and the code case, which includes all of the latest version of the code case, was expected to be voted out of ASME in June. It actually ran into a little bit of a hiccup. It received some negative votes from industry, and so we are a little delayed, but we expect that that could be voted out by ASME early this fall. We're going to have a public meeting actually Thursday of this week. We're going to lay out our plans, and as soon as ASME can get the code case issued, we are ready to go.
Okay, great. Okay, Mike, did you have something?
Yeah, and since you opened the door, we recognize that's not our brightest moment. It's taken us too long to get to where we're at. And I would just say, in general, going forward, what you can expect, in our expectation, is anytime we're faced with these issues where there is no significant safety issue at play, but we find that we're spending a lot of time to resolving, the expectation of leadership, and this is the expectation we're driving across the board, is we elevate those issues. Same with inspection, with licensing, with these sorts of decisions, we have to be attuned to, all of us, of how much time we're spending on them and escalate them so that we resolve them.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So that concludes my portion of the questions. I think this was a very productive meeting on a very important and interesting topic. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any final comments before we adjourn? Okay, thank you very much. End of meeting.